the Outer Banks. Blizzard-like conditions.
It's gonna be worse on the east side of 20.
I need you to move closer to the mic.
Yeah, but you're the one that needs to be heard, not me.
Bring up that since Matt's been here, we've had disaster after disaster.
Yeah, I wonder what the common denominator of all that is.
One, God,
He heard that.
A fire, an ice storm,
okay.
but he found it well.
I
Natural disasters.
I guess though, what if we hadn't had him, right? So maybe that's why they all waited, so we could get through them. That's right.
With the,
All right, so supposedly we're up and running. We got audio on
Yep.
our,
Apologies for that. So I'm going to turn everything over to Chad Meadows, our head consultant with CodeWrite Planners. Chad's going to basically lead us through a review of the first part of Chapter 6 of the UDO. This is the first chapter we're looking at, part of Module 2. And I'm just going to turn it over to Chad and we can start looking through that. Chad, while you do screen share, I'm also going to pull up a version on our internal screens here and just kind of follow along with you.
Sure now, doesn't work again. Doesn't work. I mean, if everybody has something in front of them, or you can put it up on the screen, then I don't need to share mine. So
Sure, go up.
it looks like it's working great. So we're good.
Perfect.
Hopefully now everybody sees the table of contents page for chapter 6. Is that visible?
we see it on our one screen over here. We do.
Okay.
You're good.
Right. I'm gonna see if I can make it just a little bit bigger to make it a little easier to see. Okay. Hi everybody. This is Chad, and thanks so much for the chance to meet with you guys. And I really appreciate the technology and everything that you guys do to make this available for people to look at. You really do go over and above the minimum expectations. So thanks for that. We are here tonight to overview chapter 6, at least the first 8 sections of this 16 section chapter. This chapter is really the meat and potatoes of your development code. It includes the development standards, the site configuration pieces, the stuff that is really, really impactful for development. So I'm going to go through each section, stop and ask at the end if anybody has any questions, and along the way, if something comes up, please just shout out. Before I do get started, it's about 6:30. How long? I'm not sure how long the meeting runs for. I just want to know so that I can pace myself properly.
You got about 15, 18 minutes. How's that?
15 minutes. Okay.
No, we'll just have to work through this at your pace so we can understand it as well, Chad.
Okay. All right. Very good. Very good. I would estimate, I mean, certainly it's going to take us probably an hour and a half, maybe a little bit more, unless you guys feel like that's too long, in which case we can shrink that if we need to. So, you know, whatever is feels right.
Okay.
Is where we can go. Okay. So I'm going to jump in. The first part of this chapter is the chapter introduction, and it just explains that this is the rules for development and so forth. The first main section is access and circulation. And inside the access and circulation section, there are essentially 3 or 4 main sets of standards, and we'll cover these in a fair amount of detail. The first being access to lots, some driveway standards generally, and driveway standards for residential and non-residential development. There are some new provisions for on-site pedestrian walkways for multi-building developments, a set of site distance triangles. These are very similar to some standards you have right now. And then finally, a very short section on vehicular gates. So this is the main sort of structure of the access and circulation section in chapter 6. Okay, so let's start with access to lots. And before I do, let me just cover with you guys briefly this applicability provision, because I want to be sure that you guys understand this. This is a little bit different than how it would be had we done this ordinance before. the downzoning bill took effect. As you guys know, we are suggesting that the new UDO basically be adopted and grant amnesty, if you will, and sort of recognize that everybody who has development on the ground at the time that the new UDO was adopted is effectively conforming and does not need to comply with the standards in the new UDO unless and until they make a change. And that change could be anything from addition of a parking space to change of a use to a rezone. So that definition of change is fairly broad. Anyway, the applicability standards are structured so that when somebody does choose to make a change on their site, again, whether that's a change in use, or redevelopment or some kind of alteration, expansion, at that point, that development would need to come into compliance with the standards in the UDO. Okay, so that's the way that this is structured. There are some provisions which we'll probably talk about more in chapter 2, or staff will talk about with you in chapter 2 when that part comes, that sets down the avenues for flexibility if for some reason a person or an applicant has a hard time coming into full compliance with these standards. There's some options for them, like a rezoning or a variance or granting consent to becoming non-conforming. So there are some options, but this is just a little bit different. You know, a couple of years ago, we would have treated existing development differently than we are now. If you exist now, you get to stay. If you make any changes, you come into compliance. Okay. And I'm sorry to belabor that. I won't cover it again, but I want to be sure that everybody understands that approach. Okay. Great. Okay. Access to lots. In a nutshell, everybody who has a lot needs to have access to it. And that means either you abut directly a public or a private street, or you have a driveway. And so, you know, pretty straightforward standard there. We talk generally about these kinds of driveway standards and how we gain access in the driveway section. One other provision that is typical for development codes, and it's something that NCDOT really prefers, if there are residential lots in town, and they abut or have direct access onto a quote unquote major street, an arterial, a collector, a thoroughfare, you know, NC 280, NC 191. The DOT really prefers that those driveways or that access be configured so that vehicles do not have to back out onto those thoroughfares. And so unless there's no alternative, these standards are structured to avoid a configuration where somebody in a residential unit would back out onto a major roadway. Okay, these are not these are very commonplace standards, and they don't bar that. It's just there's, you know, that's sort of a last resort, this backing out onto a major roadway, and that's done for reasons of safety, obviously. Let me talk about some driveways. We have some driveway standards, and I realize that these may seem like a lot to you guys and to the town, and we can adjust these as necessary. There are some basic elements in the driveway standard, and those are as follows: width, okay, overhead clearance, so that the fire truck or the ambulance can get into the driveway to get to, you know, the person who needs the help, and surfacing. So those are some of the basic kinds of parameters that we regulate. And so there are some general standards up front that contemplate, you know, driveway configurations, and those are set down in this general driveway standards section. Okay. One other thing that these driveway provisions talk about or consider is that you can enter and exit without causing danger, that there's enough room in the driveway so that you can park your car without the car hanging into the right of way. And then there's some provisions about where possible, lining up with driveways across the street. And if you have a corner lot and are able, that you locate your driveway on the less busy street, where possible. Now, these standards have a series of illustrations that demonstrate how compliance with these standards is reached. I have not yet put the illustrations in, but when you see these big white areas with this figure, bracket and a name, that's where graphics will go in the next version of the document. The text controls, the graphics support the text, and we're working on those now. So those will go in the next version. But again, you know, the text controls. Okay, so I said there's three things that kind of we deal with driveways: width, surfacing, right, and clearance. Now, this driveway apron standard, when you've got a driveway that comes up to a public street, and that street is paved, it's typical to request that driveway apron be improved. Asphalt, pavers, concrete, from the edge of the pavement, wherever it may fall, inwards, at least 5 feet into the lot line. That's done so that we don't get a bunch of gravel collecting on the public street, so that there's safety for turning movements, whether in or out. And so we've got these apron standards for you guys to look at as well. All right, so that's the driveway apron provision. There are some limitations in the statutes about having pavement surfacing standards that exceed the NCDOT standard. We're not allowed to do that. And applicants can choose to follow a different surfacing standard if they wish, but in those instances, there have to have a letter signed by a professional engineer to reconcile that there's safety, you know, that the safety concerns that we have for the reasons for these driveway aprons, that those are met if somebody decides not to use the asphalt, concrete, or pavers to surface their apron. Okay?
So is that,
Residential.
Hey, Chad,
I'm sorry, is that
Wait.
saying, I'm sorry, is that stating that, when new driveways or road access ways goes in, they have to do, the resident or the business has to do the paved apron?
Only when you're developing your site. If a new roadway goes in and you've got an existing driveway, let's say there's a gravel road and it's ultimately getting paved. Do I have to go in and pave my apron? Answer, no. If I'm doing development on my site and I've got a gravel road that was there when I built, it was subsequently paved. I didn't do any development then, but I came back 10 years later and, you know, built another building or built my house or whatever. Would I have to pave the apron at that time? Answer, yes. So existing doesn't have to do this, new does.
Okay, so
Okay?
new residents, like if it's just one house and it's a driveway, they're gonna have to do a paved apron onto the road.
If there is a change on the site. Okay, so, and by change, that might mean addition of a new accessory dwelling unit. That might mean, you know, construction of another use type, if that's allowed in that district. But if it's an existing home on an existing lot, the answer is no, they're not going to be required to pave that apron unless and until they make a change on the site.
but Chad, if you have a vacant residential lot off of a private
Yes.
gravel drive, and that
Yes.
lot does not front a public street and a home is built there, this requirement would not apply. Is that right?
That's right. This is only for
Only public street
streets.
frontage.
This is for public streets.
We have a lot of that though. We need to keep in mind, we've got a lot of that going on.
Well, I'm just looking at the extra expense because I know DOT don't take lightly people just adding stuff onto the road. And you've got to have a culvert to the specifications and everything.
the way the DOT works with the culvert, for a single family home, on a single parcel, if the property owner buys the culvert, the DOT will come put it in and then maintain it because that becomes part of the roadway drainage network. For, yeah, and for multiple homes, that would be the developer's responsibility. As far as the apron goes, NCDOT would not require it. However, it's good to have because it'll help keep that gravel out of the road. But yeah, it is an expense. So for a single family, single home on a single piece of property, it is an expense.
How much asphalt you say again, Chad? Was it 5 feet into the private driveway?
It is, it's it's from the edge of the pavement, which sometimes corresponds with the edge of the right of way and sometimes not. 5 feet into the inside of the lot line.
Might as well do 10. By the time you can get a paving contractor to come out and put down 5 feet of asphalt, you might as well do 10 feet.
See, he's talking about inside the lot line, so along
That's
two
right.
eighty, they might be a 45 foot right of way on, and plus 5.
Well, you're saying from the right of way or from the edge of
From
pavement?
the edge of the pavement,
Edge of pavement.
Oh,
5 feet into the lot line.
Very rarely does the right of way stop at the edge of pavement. There's still what's called maintained right. Well, we don't need to get off into
Okay.
that.
Well,
but am I thinking correctly though, like up 280 and all?
With 100 feet of right of way, you just go to the edge of pavement
Okay,
and then go in 5 feet.
okay.
but then if
but-
there's utilities run through there, if they come through and need to fix their utilities, they have the right to tear it up, and you have the right to have to pay to fix it again.
No, I think if it's on your driveway, they would have to fix what they tore up.
Hey, Chad,
Wait till we get to
Yes.
utilities.
so just to clarify, like Boylston Highway going south in the town has very large right of way areas. And so you're saying you have to pave from the edge of the asphalt on the public road, not just 5 feet inwards, but 5 feet into your interior property line.
That is correct.
So it
That's the
wouldn't-
way that it's drafted.
Got it. So it wouldn't be 5 feet of asphalt, it would be
Misunderstood
5
that.
feet within the lot line plus whatever it takes to get from your private property line to the edge of asphalt. So you're
That's right.
correct, it could be a larger
Yeah,
distance.
cause like they come up there and ball all that.
And,
they
and so,
find it.
I mean, what I would say is, if this is, this is really, can just be limited to non-residential, multifamily and mixed use, if you wish. We don't have to apply this to single-family detached homes if you don't want to do that. I would suggest that you do require this of new residential subdivisions, where there's maybe 8 or more or 9 or more single-family detached lots.
Makes sense.
I think it's a good idea to require that as part of the subdivision. But if you want to exempt the individual single family, that's fine. I don't think that's a problem.
We just, Chad, I mean, not necessarily so much on 280, but 191 and a lot of these other corridor routes. I mean, almost everyone's driveway's coming directly off a state maintained road, and in the future, everyone's gonna build one through there is gonna be faced with this. Not to say it's a bad thing, it's just an expense to them.
Sure.
Well, look, there's a. lot of utilities.
like 3 pages? I got it. Chad, can we back a couple of pages?
Sure.
On 281, you mentioned that the NCDOT doesn't like when you have to back out, but
That's right.
under B, I'm not seeing where it says backing out. It just says driveway serving individual residential dwelling units should generally not have direct access to a major street, which
Mhm.
would sort of be a problem down 280 where we're trying to have heavy residential zoning. Am I reading that wrong? Like,
So it says driveway servicing individual residential dwelling units should not generally have direct access to a major street unless authorized by NCDOT, right? So it 280, 191, those are NCDOT streets, right?
yeah,
And so the driveway permit that's going to be issued to development that happens along that roadway is gonna have to get permission from NCDOT. They're gonna have to get authorization to do that.
But they don't
Um,
do that for a single family, for a single home on a single lot. They don't do that. It's only for multifamily.
I'm not sure how y'all's local district
I am.
engineer approached
I was one.
in that instance, if NCDOT is not inclined to permit individual single-family residential lots,
They don't stop them. They allow them. They do not require a driveway permit. So, yeah.
But this still says that you generally should not have direct access. I'm wondering if we shouldn't get rid of that because I mean, we are trying to residentially zone 280. And you have to put a driveway in to get to your house.
it's up to you. This is a basic planning practice. If this doesn't feel like a good fit for Mills River, then I don't have a problem, stripping it out.
What would define like major street? Like would, North and South Mills be major? Like it has to like go through town, it can't end with,
Could be a primary road. NCDOT primary road, if it's a three numbers or,
so like
NC
191,
280,
or
191.
North 191.
Yeah, those are primary.
I don't know,
roads.
that was, I
Yeah.
marked it earlier as concerning.
Right.
And honestly,
Uses different terminology than a lot of other places. You guys use this phrasing for minor and major streets.
Mhm.
And generally speaking, any kind of NC highway, 280, 191, that's absolutely going to be a major street. If there are other streets, depending upon what the French Broad MPO has labeled the streets in your comprehensive transportation plan, those may be classified as major or minor based on how we end up defining this term. Generally speaking, major should include, your highways, your thoroughfares, your collectors, or your arterials. Sub-collectors and local streets are typically minor streets. And your MPO should have a comprehensive transportation plan map that designates all of those streets in Mills River.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of them though.
Yeah. I think one of the mindset behind this is if you have a big piece of property and you subdivide it into lots, the idea is that if there are 4 lots with frontage, you don't want all 4 driveways coming out onto the main road. You would want to have a separate access going around behind them so that you don't have a long, that would be for a subdivision. If someone owns a piece of property and they have they want to build their own home, there's no subdivision involved. DOT doesn't care.
That's why
Yeah.
that's how I was reading it.
Uh-huh.
I went and bought a 3-acre lot that came out on 280 and then this, if I'm reading this.
Where are you gonna go? Where you gonna
No,
go?
okay, so now I gotta go ask my neighbor
Yeah.
for an easement.
But if you've got 50 acres and you want to draw your development so that some of them access the road directly, well, first of all, DOT is not going to grant the driveway permit for all those lots because they won't allow those individual connections under a big subdivision.
Well, I'm also thinking of the footprint of if these houses are built, down 280 and they're all having to pave the apron back 5-10 feet, that's creating water runoff rather than water absorption.
I don't think gravel it's not considered a impervious surface, I don't think. Right.
I don't think so either.
It's pervious.
The watershed, it's considered impervious if it's compacted gravel.
Exactly. So you're basically just doing.
But if it's a big lot that's divided into lots that face the road, then each one of those would not be allowed under the subdivision to access the main road. They would have to have their own big right. But if it's a lot that's there, if it exists, if it's a very small subdivision, it's not.
But this does say driveway serving individual residential dwelling, so yeah, that's,
And it says should not, or as a general purpose.
yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's not a shall, it's a should. And we could say driveways serving, individual residential dwelling units in a subdivision should not have direct access.
Yeah, I would feel more comfortable like
That makes sense.
taking out single family from this or the apron conversation, just making it multifamily or commercial.
But single family though, James, can still be a subdivision.
Yeah, it's up
See
to
what I'm
6
saying?
or whatever. Yeah, I know.
We'd have to isolate our thought process on what we're trying to do here.
We basically shouldn't be creating a line of homes along NC 280, NC 191, where each one has a driveway home from a single piece of land as part of a subdivision. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because that's just not, it's not ideal.
Is there a way to write that like that?
You
Yes.
got, you got that, Chad?
Yes,
Okay,
Yes,
I hope
I
so.
have it.
If not,
Right.
don't ask me to write it.
Chad, one other problem while we're in this section is when you mentioned a minute ago that driveways shouldn't, on a corner lot, enter onto the busiest street. You know, us here in the mountains, sometimes it might be difficult to bring a driveway in on the less used street because of a hill or water running through there or whatever. We got a little different terrain to deal with around here. And as a builder, I just know that we basically have to get the driveway in where it can go with our sewer and our well in mind.
sure.
So
Sure.
we need to
So
address that a little bit.
I think if you wish that we could just drop O3F, that's the standard that you're referencing right now, that driveways on corner lots shall provide access from the street with less traffic. So that's got those wiggle words in it to the maximum extent practicable, which is
Okay.
there to sort of give you guys some flexibility. At the same time, we can strike that standard if you feel like that's not a good fit for Mills River.
I think at this point, it's not a good fit. I mean, there's places it would work, but there's a lot of places that won't also, so. I just hate to mandate that to happen or
Yep.
put it on the wish list to happen.
Sure. Right, and I want you guys to know, I mean, we didn't, this is why we have these conversations, because Mills River, and we bring this is the best practice, and this is what you do, and then you guys look at it and say, yeah, tweak it, change it, fix it for us, and we say, yeah, okay, no problem. So that's very typical.
Yeah.
Okay, good conversation. Do you guys want to talk a little bit about the residential driveways? Yep, okay.
I saw here that they were anywhere from 10 foot wide to 20 foot wide.
So they are from at least 10 feet wide for a driveway serving a single family detached dwelling on its own lot. If you're going to serve more than one individual single family detached dwelling, you should be 12 feet wide.
So you have both direction traffic.
Not necessarily. 12 feet wide is not a two-way kind of a driveway. And these are minimums. I mean, if you want wider, there's no limitation. You can have a wider driveway if you want. Now, NCDOT may control the width of your apron. They may come back and say, I'm sorry, Chad, you can't have a driveway 100 feet wide. They might tell you it can be 20 feet wide or 12 feet wide or whatever they will. The standards that we've got in C2 here are minimums. You have to be 10 feet wide. If you wanted to do a driveway that was 6 feet wide, that wouldn't be acceptable because we can't get an emergency vehicle down that road or that driveway.
Okay.
So like if you've got piece of property, you want to subdivide a piece of it or one of your kids or something like that. They build a house, you don't need a 20-foot wide driveway for that. But if you're going to subdivide and have 10 homes on a lot, use the same driveway, that needs to be at least 20 feet wide for two-way traffic. And then you got to have a driveway permit for that. If it's on a DOT road, then that governs the width where it attaches. Does that make sense?
That one does. For sure.
But if I don't want it to seem like if you do subdivide your property and give family member or sell an acre or whatever, that you then have to come in and build a 20-foot wide driveway because for just another house, or, that's not a big subdivision.
Right, the way that we've structured it, or the way that we would suggest that it be structured is, if you're just doing a single house on a single lot, it only needs to be 10 feet wide. If you've got a driveway that serves, up to 5 single-family detached dwellings on one lot or on different lots, then we would suggest that be configured in accordance with the shared driveway standards, which I'll talk about in a minute. So that's the big distinction. If you want to do townhouse, triplex, quadplex, those need to be 12 feet wide. The 20-foot number, I don't know if you're seeing that and that's making you think it needs to be 20 feet wide. It's 20 feet deep. And that depth is there so that the depth of a vehicle can be pulled outside of the right of way. So it's 20 feet deep from the lot line. Again, a typical standard applied to make sure that cars don't hang out into the street right of way.
Well, you might-
Or, over sidewalk, whatever.
You gotta think about, Chad, where we're at here, everybody's got typically long driveways, but where they might see that out is over at those townhouses. Where
Sure.
they're real small lots, you barely can get your car out there unless you're going into. Okay,
Right. So that's what these driveways serving up to 6 are all about. This does allow you to have a gravel or a crushed stone driveway. If you're a residential use, you don't have to have a paved driveway. It could be gravel, it could be crushed stone. We do have a standard in here. I'm calling your attention to it just to make sure that you guys are comfortable with it. If you're not, then we can certainly adjust it. This prohibits unpaved or dirt driveways for existing single-family homes, for new single-family homes. If you've got an existing dirt driveway, you can keep it. Do a new home, it needs to be gravel. You could pave it if you wished. How do you guys feel about this unpaved limitation? Is that okay, or is that going to be a problem?
when you say unpaved, you're talking about the gravel version also?
No, gravel's okay. Unpaved it's a dirt
Oh,
driveway.
okay, unpaved, okay.
There's no gravel, there's no asphalt.
I can't imagine
no-
anyone wanting a house without at least gravel to get up to your,
For new
Yeah.
construction, yeah, new construction, I mean, you're gonna see a bunch of them that's, ungraveled existing now, so we don't wanna get into messing with those folks at all.
no, but if you build a new one, you need gravel on your driveway.
Chad,
part of the
how do we
design.
look at this? So, I mean, we're just gonna, when we go out to look at our CO, that's when that'll be observed, right? And then what happens if that falls beyond disrepair? Are we gonna police that later on? Or does it just fall into the unpaved after it's
Great
initially,
question.
you see what I'm saying? Cause there's no way we keep up with that.
I do. And I don't think that you guys have the bandwidth to go out and do, enforcement review for whether or not somebody's gravel is thick enough, or if it's washed off and now it's just dirt. I mean, I would say to you, I wouldn't go looking for enforcement actions for that. If somebody called and complained, and said, my neighbor, doesn't have a gravel driveway on his house and he built his house after this code was adopted, that is a violation. And you need to make a decision about whether or not you're going to enforce that or not. If we put it in the code, and you do have some choice. You don't have to, follow through with a violation. If, the violator can give you a good rationale or whatever, that's really y'all's choice.
The bad thing around here, Chad, we got a lot of steep driveways, and keeping gravel on them could be a complaint mechanism that I don't want our residents to have to deal with.
Sure.
every time it gets washed off or, you know, and them try to figure out how to get it back up the hill or buy more every time. I just don't want to put them in that situation. Even being
Okay,
a
so
new home or not. So we need to
So-
think about that one a
right.
little bit.
We can certainly remove the surfacing requirement if you wish, and that just means that people can have, you know, the way that it's written right now, it's serving a residential use. The next sort of fallback position is you could require multifamily, or townhouses.
Or
to have,
subdivisions.
A surfaced driveway, but single family detached wouldn't be required to have that,
Yeah,
if that makes sense.
I wouldn't have a problem with that.
And I would say, the word unpaved to me means gravel or dirt, you know, coming from the DOT background. So an unpaved road can have a gravel surface on it. So I would be careful, or at least, you know, try to define that. And, I don't have any problem with, you know, single family. We could remove that for a single family home on a single family lot. If someone builds a subdivision,
Sure.
then there should be some expectation, because otherwise it'll fall back on us as the town or the state when people's driveways impassable. They'll come looking for help. So if you're gonna have multiple homes on a private drive over 5, and I'm good with it being over 5, needs to be paved or
Okay.
something, some sort of a durable. That one's been tested in court, the word durable.
Right. We use a phrase, all-weather surface,
On purpose.
you know, and we can explore that. You know, I understand there's a little confusion about the gravel thing, and that's certainly understandable.
I would just say, earthen or dirt driveways.
There you go. I like that.
Right,
And there's nothing to say, not that this would be enforceable. You could say they're not preferred. Just know that there's no enforcement authority behind that.
I like that.
Or just write it
Suggest.
in there so for the CO
Mhm.
that it's gravel.
Mhm.
And then after that, we don't.
Yeah, is there a way to write it to where like you'd have to have gravel for the CO, but then beyond that?
Did you hear that, Chad?
say that again.
The cons-
Till you get a CO and then we don't care anymore?
Yeah, basically, we would check that there is gravel or paved driveway upon CO release, but we are not interested in the enforcement of that in perpetuity.
You put that in the permit standards or the building permit. standards, not-
So, I mean, my advice would be if you want to exempt single family detached, do it. And we don't, you know, let's just do it.
Yeah.
I don't know
Okay
that you
with
would ever want to be in a place where you would want a multifamily or a commercial use to have paving only for CO, and then after that, you don't care anymore. I'm
true.
pretty sure that would never be the situation that you guys would want.
Okay.
So,
But also in a subdivision where a road is created, that
Mhm.
road needs to be paved.
Yes.
If you create a
That's right.
road to serve your subdivision, the people that buy into that need to have a durable surface. Otherwise, you're gonna be coming to us for help.
Pavement only or gravel, okay.
Pavement or concrete, something. I wouldn't want gravel because then it's still gonna fall to someone to maintain it, but at least with asphalt, you get a few years hopefully.
okay, I mean, I definitely, so right now, if somebody does a subdivision, they can have a private road. And, the way that the current private road standards are written, a private road can be gravel. And so today, or under this new UDO, were somebody to do a residential subdivision and have private streets, those private streets could be tar and gravel. They could also be asphalt, but there's no limitation for use of gravel on a new subdivision. So that's something, you know, I don't know if you want to talk about that when we get to infrastructure, but that's definitely something, you know, if you have concerns about gravel roads and subdivisions, we need to talk about that because that's currently allowed.
And one problem we have as a builder is, you know, on CO, if these things are required at CO, typically we don't go in there and pave right off the bat because we know we got continuous heavy loads coming in, concrete trucks. trusses, big loads, we got, heavy equipment coming in and out. We typically try to get a section and then bond it and then cap it or bond it and wait, depending on what time of year it is. Because we're just gonna destroy it ourselves before we get out of there.
Sure,
So
sure.
we,
So,
if we're gonna do that, we're gonna have to put some kind of stipulation in as to when it would need to be paved.
A lot of times they'll pave everything but the final 2 inches,
Yeah, exactly.
leave that as a binder. So,
But it does dramatically raise these lot prices if we're have to pave on them. You know, cause a lot of times in front of each house, if you divide it, you're $65 to $7,500 a house or a lot. And if it's, these bigger lots, it might even be more. Those driveways so much longer.
Well, I'm thinking more along the line of a piece of property that's divided up into 50 lots with 50 homes on it with a road that serves those homes.
Yeah.
That's just too much traffic for a gravel road. That
And I
needs to
mean,
be-
I don't know if Chad has a statistic on if you cut it off at 10 lots or more, or on this minor subdivision versus major subdivision, or.
right. That's a great question. And it's one that we actually talked about with staff because it's not always just, hey, here's this subdivision that's coming in. And are we gonna make them have gravel streets or are we gonna make them paved? It's what if there's a 50-acre subdivision that's taking place and the only access to the 50-acre subdivision is via a gravel private road that they don't own or control. In those instances, would we require that subdivider to pave the streets in the subdivision and pave the street getting to the subdivision? Which is, that it becomes a very interesting question pretty rapidly.
Well, hopefully they would have a right of way to get to that 50-acre piece of property. Because it wouldn't be, if it's landlocked, it can't be developed, my understanding.
They'd have to, yeah.
So they would have to have a right of way of a certain width. And if it's a right of way of a certain width, they have the ability to pave that. And I would say yes, because to leave a gap of unpaved for that many homes, that's going to be a nightmare. And I don't want to be the big brother that has to, but that's why we have a building code anyway, is to make sure when someone buys a home, they have a reasonable expectation of it meeting certain standards. And if you're going to have a subdivision above a certain size, and that's where we can talk about what that size is, you need to have a paved surface to get into that subdivision and serve those homes. Otherwise, like I say, I can take you to 5 or 6 different subdivisions in other places where it's a mess and people need help and they can't afford to pave it. But they're stuck with a bad problem and there's really no mechanism for the state to help them out.
So how would that work like on Gas Road, for instance, as you come around through, there's some big parcels of land and it's gravel, but it's state maintained gravel.
That's a tough one. So it would be paved up to the state road because you really have no authority to go onto the state road. But then they become a property owner and then they have certain rights as far as helping get that paved. And that's a long discussion,
Okay,
but
I just want.
yeah, that's a great question.
From my standpoint, this notion that new streets and subdivisions should be paved, I agree 100%. I really do. That will increase development costs. But the point that you're making about safety and so forth, those are real points. Right now, today, the threshold that we're using between a minor, quote, minor subdivision and, for lack of a better word, a major subdivision is 8 lots. Okay, so we could structure the standard to say, if you want to do a subdivision of more than 8 individual single-family lots, then those roads in that subdivision need to be paved. You could absolutely say that. Doesn't have to be 8, could be 12, could be 50. It's whatever you guys think makes sense from a safety standpoint. So there's that leg of the stool that we need to address. What's going on inside the subdivision? Then there's the part of how, if the subdivision gains access off of a private street, okay, which is a possibility. You guys allow them. The town doesn't do streets. If it's not an NCDOT street, it's a private street. And so how do we handle those situations where I have to travel on somebody else's private street to get to a state road? Would we let that private street segment remain in gravel, or would we want that subdivider to go through what's necessary to pave that street too? And that's a question for you guys. That issue is why we sort of took the position that private streets should be allowed to be gravel. But I'm happy to kind of work through this with you guys and find a solution that makes you comfortable.
If a person is gonna go across somebody else's property, they have to get a right of way.
Yes.
Can they not work that out? I mean, I guess we could set the standards
Yes.
of what they have to have, but ultimately, they're gonna be the ones having to pay for it. Cause we're not paying for it.
Mm-mm. The developer would pay for it, not the people that, so if you've got a private driveway and at the end of it, you sell the land, but you give a 30-foot right of way or whatever right of way we require as a town, and it's usually bigger for a bigger development. Let's say it's a 30-foot right of way, then the people that buy that land to subdivide it have permission to pave that right of way without your permission, because you've given them a right of way. And that's part
They
of,
can improve that right.
they can improve that right of way however they need
Right,
to.
but they're funding the project.
They're funding the project,
Okay.
not the people that already live there. It's the developer that comes in and does that.
Even if there's homes on past his subdivision, he can't require them folks. Like if he goes up and turns into his subdivision,
Right.
he can't
That's where he
require
starts.
those people beyond that to help.
Mm-mm.
They could if they wanted, but it's up to him to get it there if that's the way that.
He gets it to his property,
Right.
and then the rest of it is the rest.
Right, and per their agreements to whether or not they pitch in to maintain or the developer now maintains.
So Chad, have we got, curb and down drain, requirements in this anywhere that might play?
We
back
do
in?
not, we have not put in curb and gutter standards, for a couple of reasons. One, a lot of Mills Rivers and water supply watershed, and curb and gutter is really, really frowned on in those areas.
Yeah, I'm okay with that. I just didn't want us to set it at 8 and have to pave and then get back in there somewhere else and we got 10 lots, we got a curb and down drain, and then we're like, well, we should just match them numbers up. That's what I was thinking, but yeah, if we don't have it in there, I'm all right with leaving it out here.
Okay. I think it's fine for the town to set a threshold to stipulate that even private roads have to be paved as part of certain developments, right? Whether that's a non-residential development or it's a residential development. We need to decide on what the number is. Below it, you don't have to pave. Above it, you do. And what I'm hearing you guys say is it's okay for us as part of the paving standard, whatever we apply that to, that there's the expectation that the access way to that development from the closest state street has to be paved, regardless of whether or not that developer owns that roadway or just has easement access from a different landowner along an existing private road. We're going to require that private road also be paved from the subdivision entrance to the state road that serves it.
Or
And I think that's fine too.
yeah, publicly maintained maybe, although we don't have any town maintained streets, at some point we may want to. So that way does that make sense?
So initially, when we first had this conversation, there was discussion about whether or not we wanted to just mandate private streets meet public street standards so that the town could take over maintenance of those streets at some point in the future. that's a big change. It's a big jump. You could do it. I do think we should keep a threshold in place in terms of, I'm doing a family subdivision or I'm doing a
Right.
minor subdivision. I don't have to do this. But if I cross that line, whatever that line might be, you know, then I need to pay. And I think it's fine if you want to insist that those private streets that are paved meet the, you know, the NCDOT standard. I think that's okay.
Well,
That's not uncommon.
yeah,
you want
and
to do-
and the reason I would say that is at least you have some sort of a guarantee of the standard it's built to. Otherwise, what's to keep someone, not that anybody would, paving over bare earth or paving over 3 inches of gravel instead of 8? You know, if it's built to a state standard, then there's a reasonable belief it's going to last.
But you have to
That's
maintain it, so if you did it cheap the first time, you probably just have to maintain it early.
And I can take you to some roads
That
that
are,
were paved on bare earth, paved in a snowstorm, paved with sticks and rocks. And unfortunately, when the burden falls back onto the property owners to maintain it, it isn't cheap.
yeah,
And, you know, in some places, unfortunately, people can't really afford. So what they're stuck living with after the developer's gone and the new wears off of it is not good. So again, that's why you have building standards for your homes to make sure that they last and they provide a reasonable expectation of durability. And I think with the roads, that's part of it.
so
And
as
I'm,
of right now, we have nothing in this as far as like a stand, like it has to be 2 inches thick or whatever. I don't know.
right. So if you follow the state standards, you know, it's, you know, 18, 20 feet wide, you know, to meet a state road. And the bigger the development, the bigger the main road needs to be to handle the traffic. So
And don't forget them sidewalks.
But is state maintained like, would it be unreasonable? Like, would it be like you have to have 6 inches of gravel and it has to be 4 inches of asphalt and like?
no,
like,
it's secondary road standards. So for, it's 10 inches of gravel and about 1.5 inches of tar and gravel. That's the basic road. But most subdivisions don't want that. They'll want 2 inches of asphalt. And I believe it's 8 inches of gravel, 2 inches of asphalt. So it's not, and I apologize for not having that memorized. It's been a while. But basically, it gives you the expectation of having a durable road to get to your home.
Yeah.
And you're not having to spend a whole lot of money keeping it up. And I'm afraid with gravel, it's a constant nightmare. And keep in your mind, 10 trips per single family home per day.
yeah, that's,
Is that gonna be a problem, Mike, for our zoning department to keep up with and inspecting?
If it goes to
Only for the
states,
building.
if it goes to state standards, they'll have to have engineering and all that, so it backs up everything they've done out there.
Yeah, we would look at the plans to make sure that's how they're going to construct it. And what I was just looking up is our current subdivision, major subdivision road standards does reflect DOT road construction standards. But even currently, and this came up with Mills River Crossing, you know, we don't go out there and bore through the asphalt to make sure there's the correct amount of gravel. That's just not doable. So we make sure the road standard is on the plans that are approved by the town, stamped by the engineer. So if someone were to come back later, that would be that controlling document. They could go after the developer. But currently, I think Mr. Moore is correct for the larger collector roads. It is currently in our major subdivision standards to have 8 inches of compacted ABC stone and 1.5 inches of asphalt. And then you get down below that, our current major subdivision standards for local or limited local roads just calls for 6 inches of gravel. Asphalt's optional. And just for some additional context, I'm 95% sure, I need to check on my computer, but to my knowledge, every major subdivision I've approved while we've been here has been paved at the, just on their own.
Who wants to buy a house on a gravel road? I mean, single family home, that's one thing, single, but if it's a subdivision.
Now, the minors, it kind of just works itself out. The minors, it's kind of 50-50, but there are plenty of those that are gravel.
Well, cause if your 10 trips per day per family is right on 8, if and we're saying threshold's 8, that was like 26,000 trips a year. That's a lot on gravel road. I mean, 29,200.
One of the biggest budget items, and this is trivia, for the highway department is unpaved roads. Because you're constantly having to maintain them and keep gravel on them.
Mhm.
Do you guys have a sense about the paving threshold that you'd like to apply? I know we were talking about, I had initially thrown out the number of 8 simply because that's where we draw the line between a minor subdivision and something that is more than a minor subdivision. We have a couple of other kinds of subdivisions that are limited to even fewer than 8. And we have some state limitations. If somebody does a quote unquote limited subdivision, that results in 3 lots, including a residual, you can't make them put in a road. You can't. So that's another option. We could say 4 or more. Less than 4, I don't know that you're going to be able to do that. So if 8 doesn't work and makes you uncomfortable, then we could pick 4. I don't think we could go below 4.
Me personally, I just like 8 or 10, just because if somebody was to come in and want to build some affordable 1,000 to 1,500 foot homes, and keep them reasonable, they're probably not going to be able to afford to pave the road and the driveway in there to keep them affordable for these people to live in. We're looking at that. The land cost is already so expensive around here, and then the bill price is what it is. I'm just thinking that way out loud. I'm just one.
Same thing. There goes a.
I mean, it could be paid later, but initially you can get those people.
Affordability.
Right.
Yeah, that's the only reason you'd do it, just for affordability. That's the only reason you'd want to do it.
We'll probably want smaller lot sizes too, so that that land is.
It would be a somewhat isolated here, but it could happen.
I also hear a lot over, right-of-way maintenance disputes.
Yeah, but anymore though, all the new developments has that paperwork all taken care of. Most of those are the ones that the
It's a
past
big
that got added on mostly. Somebody bought a piece from grandma, and now all of a sudden you got a new person back there, and they need to get the deed work done right. They sign the right away to get them in and out, and then they're like, well, I've been using it. It's just a nightmare.
Right.
This corrects all this early with the planning and zoning approvals to make sure everybody's on board as it gets developed out. But yeah.
So for now, I'm hearing, let's start with the major as kind of the line. Is that what I'm hearing?
I think so. I mean, that's what
Okay.
I meant with.
And I think, Chad, it was the steering committee that gave direction to lower that threshold from 10 to 8. Was that correct?
Yeah, well, I think is it not currently 8 that isn't a minor, fewer than 8 now?
No, it's 10 or fewer. But I believe that was one of the last steering committee meetings that comment was made, and we changed it.
I am very much enamored with utilization of the major minor as the bright line for many things, including, including paving. I think if you're a minor, then maybe you shouldn't have to pave. If you're a major, maybe you should. And I think from a procedural standpoint and kind of keeping up with the standards, that's a much cleaner, easier sort of long-term way to do it. And so, yes, the current standard is 10. The steering committee suggested lowering that for the minor from 10 down to 8. Do you guys have any feeling about that suggestion?
Okay with that.
Yeah, 8's good.
Yeah. Would you want
Hey.
to move our screen to this page so if people are watching, they see this to page 331?
This one here?
Yeah.
We're just, scroll up to page 3. Oh, thanks, Chad.
He was there to be.
Yeah, 331 is your current private street standards. And so, you know, these are the things that you apply, and you can see that, these standards are organized into the number of units served, not necessarily the number of lots, right? The thresholds are, you know, if it's a limited local street, if it serves up to 8 residential units, if it serves more than 8 but less than 24, it's considered to be a local. More than 25, it's a collector. And then there's differential standards for right-of-way, paving, travelway width, etc., based on this. And this is what you have in your current code. If we decided that we wanted to require anybody doing a subdivision of more than 8 lots to pave, we would make some adjustments to some of these standards. And though, you know, based on our conversation to this point this evening, the suggestion was that after, if you were to pave a street, in other words, you did a subdivision of 9 or more lots, then the paving would be done to NCDOT standard, not to these standards. We would carry forward your limited local standards for private streets that were serving minor subdivisions or individual residential lots, what have you. Okay, so that last column would stay, but it would, you know, that would be in place, but anything that got paved follows NCDOT standards. Your collector column and your local column, those go away because now we're following the state standard, if that makes sense.
I think so.
Good discussion.
Yeah.
This is tough stuff, believe me.
Yeah.
The infrastructure stuff is some of the hardest stuff to deal with. Are we feeling good? 8, pave to the state street, all good?
Yep. All good.
NCDOT standard. All right.
Subdivision.
If, by the way, we had set down, you know, these kind of residential, driveway standards. I don't know that you want to cover it tonight or not. There are some access management things that we would suggest be used for residential, whether it's single family, detached, or multifamily, regarding, you know, spacing between driveways. For instance, a lot of places limit the proximity of a driveway to another driveway or to a street intersection. So those are set down in that required number section 04A through D. So that's there for you guys to look at. There's also some spacing standards. We would suggest driveways serving 5 or fewer homes be 20 feet apart, which is enough room to fit a car, park a car between the driveways.
Now,
We've
the,
got some standards for shared residential driveways. Okay, these are driveways that cross lot lines and serve multiple pieces of property. The driveway needs to be in an easement that's recorded. We suggest that it be 50 feet wide, and that basically, you know, these things be available for developments that serve, you know, up to 5 residences. We may come back and make some adjustments to this based on what you guys have told us about paving. Maybe we reconfigure this a little bit and structure it to be at our bright 8-unit bright line test. If you're fewer than 8, then you can have a shared driveway. If you're more than 8, you know, then you could be a private street, but you'll need to be paid. Okay? Okay. We have some standards for non-residential driveways. I would suggest that, you know, you guys carry these forward. The gist of these is, that, you know, it needs to be 12 feet wide for each single direction of travel. And that you limit this to, you know, what NCDOT says you need to have in terms of their street driveway access manual. You know, that we follow the driveway apron standards, that we not necessarily waive those for non-residential or multifamily development, you know, that we're going to hold the line there. More flexible for single family detached, not so for non-residential and mixed use. Okay?
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
That's basically it on the driveways.
Yeah.
All right?
Okay.
The fire code has,
Okay.
does,
I'm gonna shift on to another section.
Hey, Chad.
New section.
I was
Sorry,
gonna
Chad?
ask, does the fire code also govern access, like all-weather surface, certain wet turnarounds, you know, in subdivisions
Yes.
and,
It does.
so that actually may stricter than,
Right.
okay,
Yes.
there you go, okay.
Every turnarounds, yeah.
Okay. On-site walkways, these are standards, that we would suggest be applied inside the town center, inside any mixed-use development, that's inside a conditional zoning district. Anything that's got two or more buildings in the general commercial district, every multifamily, every townhouse, and, you know, all institutional forms of development. So those are your post office, your government office, your church, your school, whatever. And that there be some basic pedestrian walkway standards, and here they are. And in a nutshell, you connect the building entrances, together. And if you've got a sidewalk or a greenway trail that abuts your site, your pedestrian walkway connects to that. If you don't have a sidewalk or a greenway, then you don't need to connect to it.
Hey, Chad, so is that, we go up a page?
I'm on page 287.
And where there's two or more, number 3, developments of 2 or more non-residential principal buildings. So you have to have a sidewalk that connects the 2 buildings, but you don't have to have like a street sidewalk. Is it one or the
Correct.
other, or you have to have both?
So it's a good question. If you have 2 buildings on a site, you need to have a pedestrian access between those entrances.
Mm-hmm.
If there is an existing sidewalk that runs along your frontage, you need to connect to that so that there's a way for a person to walk from the sidewalk to the entrance of your building. If you're doing new development and there is a sidewalk requirement in place and the town does not waive that requirement through a fee in lieu, then you would need to put in the sidewalk along your frontage and connect to it on site.
Okay, so we're tying up the, loophole of having a walking trail that doesn't connect to anything.
Correct.
Yeah? Okay.
Yes.
So Chad, if you've got a sidewalk on the, basically out there next to the right of way of the highway, then you've got your sidewalk along the buildings. Does that mean that sidewalk elevation wise and all has to connect, or can they walk through the parking lot in a designated marked off area?
So as a practical matter, as the answer is no, you don't have to put a sidewalk in your parking lot.
Okay.
Because that's a bit overkill. Now, really large developments, like a Target or something like that, you do want one primary pedestrian access way, but most things that are gonna happen in Mills River, the answer
Okay.
is no.
Okay,
You do want it striped. Wherever I'm crossing over as a pedestrian over a main travel way, you want some striping. And you'll see that like out in front of the, in front of the Ingles,
Yeah.
the Publix, you know, those areas will be striped. Those guys understand that that's, you know, important. There needs to be that, but that's where it stops.
Okay.
It's not a sidewalk.
okay, that makes sense.
Do we have a minimum width? I apologize for not seeing that for the sidewalk. I know it says ADA standards, but do we want to say a minimum of 5 feet wide or
I thought I saw it in here somewhere.
I missed it.
It's totally up to you. These on-site pedestrian walkways, the reason we call them out differently is so that we can apply a different standard than a public sidewalk standard if you so choose, or you may apply a public sidewalk standard if you like.
There's an ADA requirements. I see that right there.
Which is a 2% cross slope and and the grade of it. If you have a sidewalk less than 5 feet wide, it's not really practical. 5 feet's about as narrow as you can get
Well, what we've learned with the,
without any obstruction in that.
acoustic trails, you know, it sometimes tends to make people think it's a four-door to drive.
Right.
So being restricted where they can't get both wheels up on it.
Yeah, but 5 feet wide, if you're walking next to someone, you know, it's hard to do that on something narrower than that.
That's up to you guys.
I'd be fine with the ADA stuff, because I think that if you're commercially building, you're probably gonna be doing that anyway.
Right. But ADA standards and also pro WAG, which I believe has finally been adopted, you may only need a 40-inch path around an obstacle. And if you build a new sidewalk, you shouldn't have any obstacles in it.
Right.
You know, that's, if you're building something from scratch, you should build it without obstacles. Sometimes you have to build a sidewalk where there's already utility poles or whatever, and it's hard to get that 5-foot width. And you know, just think about, we're all one twisted ankle from a wheelchair, and then trying to get through it on a wheelchair,
Yeah.
and that opens your eyes to ADA stuff.
Shall we go with the 5-foot width for the pedestrian circulation? I think that's fine.
That's not unreasonable, I don't think.
All right. Gotcha. Okay. Couple more sections, subsections here. This is a site distance triangle standard. You have these in your current provision. This will be a lot easier to grasp once I put the illustration in. These are instances where you've got two roadways coming together, or there's a driveway that's connecting to a road. There's some limitations on fences, signs, some forms of landscaping, so that there's a clear sight line from when you're seated in your vehicle and you're pulling out onto a road, or you're on the road and you're pulling into a driveway. And those numbers are 10 and 70. The 10 feet is along the driveway. The 70 is along the street that you're pulling into or out of. And so those are some standards. There's some limitations on things below 2.5 feet. I'm sorry, above 2.5 feet, but below 10 feet. Okay.
Yeah, that's
Typical stuff, and you have these now.
typically it's measured from the right of way, correct? And,
Used to be, the statutes changed.
okay,
Now we measure it from the pavement edge.
and we should also, in my opinion, somewhere somewhere have guidelines inside of the right of way. Because if you got a road with a 50-foot right of way, 25 feet from the edge of pavement, you don't want people going right up next to that road and planting Leland cypresses that block sight distance from the next door neighbor's driveway.
Right.
Or putting up a fence. And I've seen that happen where people
Sure.
don't like the neighbors, so they block their sight distance. And that comes back to the municipality to solve.
And so, I mean, generally speaking, the statutes say, these site distance triangle limitations, are applied, from the edge of the pavement, um, in recognition of the point that you're making, right? But depending upon how deep that is, that could wind up, somebody might still have something that is still in the right of way, but it's outside the site distance triangle. But the General Assembly says that's okay. As long as I'm in the travel way and I've got that 1070 to protect me, then that's fine. So that's how they've changed that.
Well, if it's an NCDOT road, then there are guidelines in the right of way. So we're covered there.
Chad, we're gonna take just a quick bathroom break, if you don't mind.
Okay. Very good. I'll be standing by. We have one more subsection and then we'll provided there are, accommodations for, emergency service vehicles, right? Whether that's a Knox box or a gate that's tuned to a siren frequency or whatever, that there be a means for emergency service providers to get past the gate should that be necessary. There, basically no limitation for gates across driveways, like, the driveway into a fancy subdivision or the driveway into a car lot or something like that, that those are permitted, no problem. However, you've got to have, in those instances where you're gonna do a gate, it's gotta be at least 50 feet from the street right of way so that there's stacking space off of the street, so the car doesn't stop in the road to wait for the gate to move. That there be some kind of vehicular turnaround in place in case you didn't realize there was a gate, can't get through, or the gate's not working or whatever, that you're not just stuck there and people are stacking up behind you. And then finally that, that any sort of vehicular gate be included on a site plan and reviewed by the town. So those are the basic standards.
So
Questions
Chad,
about those?
so Chad, let me ask you, so we're faced with possibly a 240 something lot subdivision right off of 280.
Mhm.
I don't know that 50 foot would give them stacking room because every other subdivision they've done has been gated.
Mhm.
So should we set a standard in there if it's coming off of one of these majors that 50 needs to be deeper, or are we just gonna allow them to engineer it? I mean, I just don't want cars hanging out in 280 because that's gonna be a mess.
Of course, I agree with you 100%. The queuing zone that we've set down is enough for 3 cars. And if that's a minimum, they could have it more if they want, or we could raise it if you wish. That's another possibility.
I mean, it's like James brought up, tractor trailers, the box is 53 plus a tractor in front of it. If there's a car behind it, you're automatically got people. But there may have to have would we require a right turn into that?
Depends on what your traffic impact analysis says. That's likely, but, it depends on the TIA.
Yeah, if it triggers the TIA threshold.
Okay, so I'll need help you guys on how to make sure we've got this to where we don't have to address it later.
Are there additional subdivision standards later in this chapter, Chad, that this could be inserted into for larger subdivisions?
So we can structure so vehicular gates is usually pulled out on its own because it doesn't fit very well with anything else. And we don't, the way that we apply the standards, whether it's a public street, a private street, or a driveway, it doesn't fit neatly, anywhere else, which is why it winds up in access. If you're concerned about having adequate stacking space in front of the gate, then I would suggest that we supplement what's there with a range where
Okay,
the more development you've got, the deeper the stacking space. Does
I'm
that make
okay
sense?
with that. And you can work on that for us in the future and bring it back to us, because
Okay.
we don't necessarily have to fix that tonight. Just know we're gonna have to think about that one.
Okay, great, no problem. I'm making a note to do that.
We do have current standards for this in our ordinance, and the current standard we apply is also 50 feet.
I just know that 280 could be a mess.
Okay.
Uh,
Good discussion. All right, I'm gonna shift gears now. I'm gonna close up access and circulation, and we're gonna go to architectural standards and guidelines. Okay. There are 4 main sections here. And what we've done is we are applying architectural standards based on the kind of use that you are proposing. So you might be a non-residential development, and if you are, you've got to comply with those standards. If you're mixed use, you've blended residential and non-residential, then you've got those standards. If you're multifamily, then you've got the multifamily standards. The last section, 635, single family residential design guidelines. And that wasn't a casual choice of words. Those are guidelines. We're not allowed to have mandatory design standards for single family development. We can write guidelines, which can be used in certain circumstances, say as conditions of approval for a conditional rezoning. So I'll cover that when we get to that part of this section, but I wanted to kind of just give you the overview of the standards and guidelines portion of the code. Now, generally speaking, the applicability that we set down, these non-residential design standards, they apply to all commercial uses. Okay, in your use table in chapter 4, I think you guys have talked about that. We've organized the use types by use classification. One of those is commercial. Everybody in the use table who's under the commercial use classification would be subject to these non-residential design standards. So too would a handful of industrial uses, flex space, industrial services, manufacturing, warehouse, wholesale. They would also have to meet with these standards. Plus a handful of institutional use types, assembly, daycare, schools, government, healthcare. Okay, so those are the ones who are subject to these standards. Again, existing development does not have to comply. You're not non-conforming if you don't. You get to stay like you are forever. If you want to make a change to your site and these standards apply to you, then you need to come into compliance with them or use one of the other flexibility mechanisms that we've built into the process. Okay? Now, generally speaking, these standards are the same provisions for non-residential that you guys have today in your corridor overlay district. Okay? Your corridor overlay district has two kinds of legs to the stool. The first is a building wall articulation standard. The second are some exterior material standards. Those kinds of provisions are carried forward here. Okay? We've added a third kind of a standard for your consideration, which is a maximum building size. Okay? But before I go any further, I want to be sure that you know that we are suggesting that while these standards are very similar to what is in your corridor overlay currently, that we have not carried forward the corridor overlay and instead are suggesting that these requirements be applied uniformly to non-residential development, commercial, industrial, institutional throughout town. Okay, so your corridor overlay standards are applied within 500 feet of 280, 191, and 9 other streets in town. If I have a use that is in that area, right, in that zone, 500 feet from the right of way of those streets, then I have to comply with these standards today. What we're suggesting going forward is that these standards be uniformly applied to all of these uses, new uses, regardless of whether they're 500 feet from 280 or 1,000 feet, 280. Okay, so I want to be sure that that difference, that you guys are aware of it. Okay.
There's no, under the exemptions, I wrote down AG or ag is because it's on the very first line. It doesn't need to be ag is exempt in every one of the exemptions.
That's correct. That's right. So if you're a bona fide farm, you're exempt from this. Okay?
Okay, so on page 1, line 1 covers it all the way through. Cause I think in our code book
Yes.
now, it's on every one of them under all the exemptions.
Yes, we're big believers in saying something once and not having repetition where we
Okay.
can avoid it.
That's fine. I wanted you to repeat it just so I felt comfortable.
Now,
Thanks.
having said that, there is something, I don't want to digress too much, but we are talking about in the use table, let me jump over to this so that we can just be sure that we're all clear about this. In the use table, we have set down a series of 2, 4, 6, 8, 9 use types that are listed here, okay? And these are permitted in every district. We haven't made those changes to this use table yet. But I want to be sure that you guys are clear. These are here for those instances where somebody might have an agricultural processing or an agricultural product or a greenhouse or horticulture or something like that that is not in a bona fide farm, okay? If you're not in a bona fide farm, we are suggesting that you comply with the standards. So I'm doing commercial greenhouse and I'm not in a bona fide farm, then I would need to comply with the design standards.
I thought it was
Okay.
I thought, Chad, it was just the commercial use classifications only.
Fair enough. That's right. Good point, Mike. That's right. And these are in the agricultural use classification. So these guys, even though you might fall within what is actually a quote unquote industrial use. I'm an animal processing plant. I make chicken for consumption. I'm a slaughterhouse. Because I'm not listed in the commercial use classification, I do not have to meet those design standards. Right? We're good with that. Yep. Thumbs up.
Yep.
Okay. Good. Going back to the design standards. We are suggesting the maximum building size be set at 70,000 square feet. That development subject to these standards be configured so that a building not be larger than 70,000 square feet, which is the size of a large grocery store.
So I wrote down a question when I was looking through this earlier and put, what about Ferncliff? So are there
sorry?
buildings?
What about industrial parks?
Yeah. Cause I think there's
Right,
buildings that are
right.
bigger than this. Yeah.
So what about industrial parks? The way that this is drafted right now, it would apply to whatever industrial uses we've set down here. So including manufacturing, warehouse, and wholesale sales. Okay, so that's how this is drafted now. If you're uncomfortable with that or think that that might not work well for industrial, we can do a variety of things. One, get rid of this maximum building size standard altogether. Two, exempt industrial from these maximum square foot limits. Or three, raise them.
Well, I think we could definitely we could limit it to the industrial, but now, heaven forbid a super Walmart or something come in here around Ingalls or somewhere in the future, I'm sure it's gonna be bigger than 70,000.
Probably so.
So I just don't know if
So you're saying, don't have this apply to industrial.
for sure.
So my cat sweater factory can be 120,000 square feet,
But it's only limited in industrial places.
Right. only in industrial places.
That's the reason I'm
That's right.
comfortable with that.
Yep.
That's the reason I'm comfortable with
So schoolhouse, the new warehouse on schoolhouse is in industrial on the new map. And bigger than this, but it was fine. They could do that again. Or if this
It's
was
already
2028, they could do this.
Yes, but if they
Uh,
were zoned industrial on the new map and it was a new development, if we do the industrial exemption, they'd be fine.
That's what I'm.
For a Walmart, for any other use, I mean, the first thing staff would recommend would be the variance process. Because any of these dimensional requirements can be varied from through a board of adjustment. Chad, one other question I had, are there maximum non-residential building sizes by zoning district? Because I know we have that currently in some of our districts, but I can't remember if that was carried through or if it's just in the design requirement here.
So that's a great question. The only zoning district that includes a footprint limitation, I think is the town center district. Now, if you wanted to broaden that, I think we could. But I want to be clear about how these standards work. These don't apply based on a district, okay? These apply based on a use type. So it wouldn't matter if my industrial building, my sweater factory, was in the industrial district or the GLC district or the town center district. These design standards apply to me because of my use, not because of my district. Okay. Now to the question, could the new industrial warehouse that's being built on Schoolhouse Road that's larger than 70,000 square feet, if we exempted industrial, then obviously it could be larger. If we chose not to exempt industrial, then that new warehouse, obviously this thing that's already approved, it gets to come in, you get to come in, that's fine, you're already approved. This would be for new. I think it's fine to exempt the industrial use types from the maximum size. I think you're wise not to do that for commercial, because of the super Walmart question that came up. I will say this, the likelihood that you would see a development, a commercial development come in and want to be bigger than 70,000 square feet, the likelihood is that they will use the conditional rezoning path to reach that, not the variance. And that's actually good for you for two reasons. One, you get to see the site plan before it gets approved. And two, you get to negotiate, okay? You don't get either one of those things as part of a variance. Okay. So the conditional rezoning is a way to maintain more control over that 80,000 or 90,000 square foot super Walmart.
Hey,
if that makes sense.
Hey, if in the future we wanted to get tighter, like in the past, I lightheartedly said a gold gutter standard to slow down development. Is that considered a down zone, or we can still work on this section past next July?
That is a gazillion-dollar question. And generally speaking, the answer to the question is, yeah, that's a down zoning. Yes. Okay. But there are a couple notable caveats. All right. One is if it happens to be a residential zoning district that you're talking about, you can make that development non-conforming and you don't have to get their consent. Okay. So there may be a misconception out there that you cannot downzone property at all ever. That's not true. You can downzone property. The caveat is you have to have consent first. Yeah. Okay. So if you can get consent from everybody you're downzoning, you can do it. There's no you can't do it. It's just that you have to have consent. That's a high bar to pass, but you can do it. Now, we've structured this ordinance. One of the reasons why we exempted all of the existing development from these standards, right, is so that we can sidestep those limitations on downzoning. All right. It's applied to new development. That's it. But what we've done is broaden the definition of what new development is. So if you want to make a change to your existing development that got to be exempted from these rules, then you're quote, new development and you've got to comply. So that's how we've circled around this downzoning limitation that we've got. Going forward in the future, you wanted to lower your standard or raise your standards, okay? And we have 70,000, you want to make it 60,000. We use the exact same strategy, okay? If you exist, you're exempted and it's only for new. But if you make any change, you're considered new. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that keeps my headspace in the, yes, it does. Thank you.
It is definitely more complicated than it needs to be, and I'm sorry that it has happened, as I'm sure you are. But that's where we are. Okay, so we're thinking maybe the 70,000 square foot limitation is a little bit overkill for industrial. Maybe we waive that for industrial. Okay, that's cool. Let's talk about the building wall articulation standards. Right now, your current code says you got to have some articulation. The building has to have some visual interest in it. It can't be a long monolithic building wall with no treatment or anything like that. And the way that it's done now, it's very confusing because it talks about when it's visible from the road. Okay. And that can be different based on the site that you're in or what time of year it is or what have you. What we're suggesting be done instead is that we have a set of articulation features, okay, 6 or 7 of them that are listed, and I'll show those to you in a second, and that we apply a minimum number of articulation features to a primary or a secondary building wall. A primary building wall is the one that faces the road that you're addressed from. A secondary building wall is one that faces another street or a park or residential development. A tertiary building wall doesn't have to have any articulation standards. That's the back of your building or an interior side facing another commercial structure. Okay, so we've tried to be very clear about what building walls have to have this articulation. And if you're a primary building wall, you got to have 2 of the 7. Which 2? You pick as applicant. Secondary building walls, 1 feature. Which one? You pick. Okay. Here are the 7 different building type articulation standards that you may pick from. And I'm not going to go over all of these unless you guys have questions. Basically, I've got projections or recesses. I've got bowed or curvilinear building walls or green walls, or I've changed the roof up, or I've shifted materials on the wall face, whatever. We've also added an outdoor seating option as a means of encouraging outdoor gathering areas. So that's our approach to this building articulation stuff. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, it always creates a little heartburn with the builders or whoever, but yeah.
Right. I mean, yes, it does. And to be fair, you guys are requiring articulation features now.
Yeah, I know about the heartburn.
Share the heartburn.
Yeah, I mean, we hear about that about as much as we hear about a lot of other stuff, to be honest with you.
Right. Understood.
Is there a way to make sure that we know going into the permit process what wall is what? I feel like we've ran into this before, so that way it's this wall is there a way to put that in here?
Yes, there'll be a diagram that sits right here that explains how that works. Yes. Okay. Absolutely. One thing I dusted over very quickly for those that have concern and heartburn about these standards. There's a common sense exemption in here. Maybe it is common sense, maybe it's not. You guys should think about this. If you've got a site and I can't see the building, okay, then I'm exempt from the standard.
I mean, that makes perfect sense, but, we're at the discretion of whoever's making that call. And,
That's right.
you know, then that's where the council gets called out if there's not agreement on it,
Understood,
you know,
understood.
and we don't necessarily hire and fire those people, so.
What is possible here for us is we can enhance this exemption language, okay? To say things like use types located on lots of 10 acres, or use types configured so that the closest building wall to any street is 1,500 linear feet, or use types that are located behind 500 feet of existing trees that are maintained in perpetuity don't have to meet these standards. So we can add some clarity to these exemptions if you guys like the idea of an exemption in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, I always like an exemption for when it just makes perfect common sense. Another one that's tough is when they have an existing building and they go to add on to it. And all of a sudden, this little 10,000 square foot, if they've added on to 30, looks like the Taj Mahal and nothing's happened to the other, and it just don't make no sense. Yes.
Yep.
Have to bring it
Yep.
on.
That's a great point, and it's a real problem.
Yeah, it's a real problem.
In the past, we would have said, oh, that's non-conforming, and we have these very detailed tables about applicability, about, you know, you're doing this or you're doing that, you don't have to comply, you do have to comply. And that's all kind of gone out the window because of this downzoning stuff. So, you know, I mean, we can attempt to reinsert that kind of a provision that contemplates, here are the situations when an existing building would have to come into compliance with the standards. That's something that can be done. It is more complicated. It will be more complicated, and it will result in begging the question from applicants. You guys have put this scaled compliance standard in for the design provisions. Why don't you have these scaled provisions in for all the development standards, parking, landscaping, lighting? And you're going to be presented with that question. And then you will have a development code that is very complicated. So that's, you know,
Can they be
in pursuit of common sense, we've left common sense in the dust, and we're now in this like overly prescriptive world. So that's the, you know, those are the things that we have to talk about, and you guys need to say, yeah, we recognize this isn't perfect, but it's manageable, or, you know, we want to have that extra complexity.
For the ones adding on, could we simply do something as simple as if they add on 50% more to their existing building, they have to come to the architectural standards if they're in these? Or is that something that just,
You could do that.
I mean, cause every once in a while, we've just got somebody that's adding on, I don't know, what was that, 20,000 feet on the 50, and then it just looks fine.
So Chad, does this, just to clarify, does this apply to new construction for buildings only, or does it apply to building additions also?
This applies to any form of development.
Got it. So
Um,
additions.
Yeah, except what is granted amnesty at the adoption time.
If you just look at that and see if you could come up with something, I mean, I ain't necessarily say it's gotta be 50%, but look at it. I think it
Sure.
would make a little more sense.
Right. That's not uncommon. One follow-on question, if I may. In those instances where we've got an existing building, and it's proposed for alteration, and we want to add some floor area, and that additional floor area is less than 50%, we're not going to apply the standard. If it's more than 50%, we are gonna apply the standard. Here's the question. Do we apply the standard to all of the building or just the portion of the building that is being added?
Would that by chance be something that would be good for a special use permit? To where they come in and tell you what it is that they don't,
Conditional use,
conditional,
conditional use.
so that they don't come in and
But
build
they're on the
something and then
existing
change
other-
it.
And it's not a rezoning.
Yeah,
It's- yeah.
So, hold that thought a minute. Let's see. Chad, I've got Mark Lampkus here from the, chair of our planning board and board of adjustments, and he's,
Yes.
you want to weigh in something on this?
Yeah,
Cause you deal with it more. than we do.
generally speaking, when everybody gets amnesty. Yeah, change a little thing, either in your business or by your house. Now you're not conforming. Do I have to, is there a way around this? Can I ask for an exception? Is there a process?
Right, great question.
So
So,
So
remember in the downzoning situation, what we decided to do is grant amnesty to everybody who exists, all right? And so if I'm out on the ground today, I get to keep what I've got. If I want to make a change, I need to come into compliance with the rules. And what we want to say is I have to come into compliance with the rules that are in place at the time that I submitted my application, okay? Not the rules that might have applied to me 10 years ago or 20 years ago, but the rules in place at the time that I just filed the application. Now, what Bert's asking is, if I have this existing development, I got amnesty, and I want to make some kind of de minimis change, right? And the code says I've got to come into full compliance. Are there flexibility options? The answer to the question is yes, there are. Okay, but you might not like them. The first of those flexibility options is to get a variance. Can I ask for a variance from these requirements? I want to make my minor change and I don't want to comply with the new rules. I can ask the Board of Adjustment to give me a variance. Now, Board of Adjustment is bound by the statutes in terms of what's a hardship, what's not a hardship. And if it's not a hardship, in the classic sense of the word as it's defined under the statutes, then your Board of Adjustment should not grant that approval. Okay, that's an issue. What other flexibility mechanisms do we have? Well, the next one is what you just said, a conditional rezoning. Okay, I've got an existing use, I got amnesty, I want to make a change, I don't want to come into compliance with the new rules. What do? I file an application for a conditional rezoning, and we enter into a negotiated discussion about which parts of the standards I'm going to apply or comply with, and which parts I'm not going to comply with. And that's all set down in my conditional rezoning approval, should I get a conditional approval. Okay, so that's flexibility mechanism number 2. Flexibility mechanism number 3 is, let's just say I don't want to do a rezoning. I can't get a variance. I don't want to do a rezoning. Or worst case scenario, I asked for a conditional rezoning and it got turned down, because that can happen sometimes. What's my third option? The third option is you can request to become non-conforming, okay, which would allow me to do my change on my existing development and not come into compliance with the rules, but I have to grant consent for becoming non-conforming. Why is that crazy thing in there? Because the state says we have to. We have to have that standard now, all right?
But you can only do that once.
Sorry, say that again?
You can only do that once.
you
No,
can't become worse non-conforming.
Oh, really?
Really?
Well, so here's the question. Now, and this is where things get even more complex, if you can believe it. The decision about whether or not I can become non-conforming is not in the hands of the applicant. It is in the hands of the town. You may decide, well, Bert, I'm not going to let you become non-conforming. You have flexibility mechanisms available to you, right? You can get a variance, you can get a conditional rezoning. We're not going to grant you a non-conforming status. So come into compliance or follow the code. So this decision about whether or not I become non-conforming because I'm opting not to follow the rules is a decision process that the town can make and the town should make. Otherwise, nobody's going to do a variance. Nobody's going to get a conditional rezoning. They're simply going to opt into the non-conforming thing and grant, and grant you consent to render them non-conforming. Okay? Now, it may be that you're okay with that. You will have to track it forever now. You'll have to keep up with who's given consent for what kind of nonconformity forever. So I would suggest you proceed with caution in the granting of nonconforming status. Further, and Chapter 5 has not yet been configured to deal with this, we need to talk about what is the standard going to be for development that chooses the non-conforming path. Are we simply going to say, you don't have to come into compliance at all, or you need to come into partial compliance where you can? Where is that? That hasn't been discussed yet, and needs to be covered. But that's further down the road. So to answer Bert's question, is there flexibility? Yes. There's 3 ways to do it. In every one of those instances, some sort of approval from the town needs to be obtained. And the decision point for this council is, how difficult do we want to make it for somebody to reach non-conforming status and be exempted from the rules, even though they're making a change to their development? And that's a policy question. And I'll stop there and ask if you've understood what I've said, and then if you have questions.
Good. We seem to understand exactly what you said. Bert,
It's awesome.
yeah, Bert.
The only question I have is when you say the town decides, is that the zoning administrator, the Board of Adjustment, Planning Board, or Town Council?
I think on the variances, Chad, correct me if I'm wrong, will be the Board of Adjustments. The conditional zoning will be by council.
Yes.
And the, basically the other one too, the unconforming would be council. Is that right, Chad?
I'm very happy that Bert asked that question. We started to scratch the surface on this with the steering committee. I believe personally, what I told the steering committee, and my personal belief is that yes, town council should be the body that reserves the right to grant non-conforming status. That is my belief. And I say that because I think there is the exercise of legislative discretion here. You are granting somebody the ability to not follow the rules. And that should be done by somebody who is elected.
Okay. Yep. And then if they, like you're saying, tracking this, if they become non-conforming and 10 years down the road, they sold the business, another business come in and the cat sweater factory want to go in there, then they would have to come into conforming at that point
If it's a change of use.
because of change of use.
Right, yes.
Okay.
Generally, yes, unless the consent, unless the stipulation as part of the non-conforming authorization clarifies that they don't have to do that,
Okay.
then yes, they would.
Okay. Okay.
And then, so nonconformity is not a one-time necessarily. We could, as a council, can grant a further so you don't have to worry about spending all your green stamps one time. You can come
That's right.
back and do it again, as long as the council finds it reasonable.
That's correct. I think as a practical matter, you guys are gonna wanna structure these so that you're not inundated with, 100 non-conforming requests every time you meet.
Right.
You're not
gonna
gonna
have
want
4-hour
that.
count
So you're gonna be judicious in how you grant these things, and my guess is that fewer people get them than ask for them.
I was gonna
Not
say, wouldn't it
surprising.
make, it'd be counterintuitive if you
Oh, yeah.
weren't able to meet in the middle on a conditional and then turn around and ask for a variance? I mean, you
Yeah.
should assume the answer is gonna be no. I mean,
That's correct.
that's my
Okay.
thought.
I think
This
something,
non-conforming granting thing should be like the last resort. It should
Yeah.
not be the go-to. It should be the last resort.
Yeah.
And frankly, one of the approval criteria that you guys should embed in that decision is, has this applicant requested a conditional rezoning or not? And if not, why not? Because that's the process that you should be using, right? Not just five people say, hey, it's okay, go ahead, you don't have to follow the rules, Bert. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Yep.
It does.
Great. I'm so glad that you guys grasped that and that we had a chance to talk about it. You guys, nobody else, there's no other local government in the state has these rules. This hasn't been invented yet. We are inventing it as we go. So I'm glad you're on board. That's fantastic. Okay, so we got this building articulation thing. We'll we'll go in and do some tweaks so that we don't have some crazy about, like, I'm just doing an addition. I'll reveal to you that when we apply these standards and you've crossed the threshold, my strong feeling is that we only apply the design standard to the new part of the building. And I realize that can create some weird looking buildings, but sometimes the cost of retroactively applying these things can get a little bit out of hand. So that's kind of where I'm headed, but if you think we should apply it across the entirety of the facade, I'm on board. I'm okay.
No, I'm just to the new part that,
Okay. All right, great. The last standard in these non-residential standards are exterior materials, and these are also in your current provision, okay? And what we've done is change these around a little bit. There are still some prohibited materials, but I want to come back to those in a second. We've added some configuration standards. These are general rules of thumb, okay? And they read like the heavier material needs to be below or closer to the ground than the lighter material. Unless it's on a corner or it's around a door or a window. That exterior materials should take place at logical locations, not halfway down the middle of a wall or, some other kind of weird place, but rather where building wings intersect, where we have interior corners, where it makes logical sense. Then there's some provisions about not having material changes at outside corners. And the best example I can give you there is maybe you've driven through a neighborhood where the local government has rules about brick, and you have to have brick on the front facade. And so the front of the houses are brick, on the sides of the houses are vinyl siding. And you've got this weird transition right at the corner, right, where side is vinyl and the front is brick. This material return standard says you can't do that. You have to go to a logical termination point for your brick. It can't just be at the edge and then you can go to vinyl. That makes sense. Okay. Material configuration. We've got your prohibited materials. These should look familiar. No corrugated sheet metal. No smooth face concrete block. No vinyl siding. Remember, these are non-residential buildings. No asphalt shingles. No mirror glass. Okay, this is not Dallas. No synthetic stucco within 2 feet of the grade. Why? Because it rots if it gets wet. So some prohibited materials, and then we've got some colors that these are new. You don't have these right now. And they just simply say, we don't want to see neon or day glow colors as primary building colors. You can use pastels, you can use traditional, you know, community material colors that you might see, but no neon, no day glow. Happily, this hasn't happened to you. In some places, it happens where people paint their building pink or pink and purple, so that they're seen. And that hasn't happened in Mills River. Let's hope it doesn't. If you have these standards, hopefully it won't. Okay? Questions on colors?
I think I have one, Chad. One thing I've run across is, there's a lot of people are building darker colored buildings now. And so in a couple of reviews, we've had folks that maybe have proposed stucco, but it is like the darkest gray you can have, where it actually looks like, you know, concrete. Is that, I'm just curious for council's perspective, is that something you want to trend away from, or is that considered at all in this? Because I know, again, in our current corridor overlay standards, it talks about the natural materials, stone, wood, brick, etc. But it didn't really touch on that. And I know we've turned some architectural designs away just based on that dark color because it looks like concrete. And I guess it's for council and Chad. And I'm thinking specifically of Mills River Crossing related stuff, not related to single family, but for other proposals.
Sure. I guess if it fell into those corridors where it had to have two elements, if
Break it up.
might be okay if it was broken up. But if it was a single solid wall, I could see where it would be disliked. Not really fitting the reason for it being there.
That cheaper than, like, why would there be a reason to do that?
It's more for, honestly, so you don't have to paint it as quick. The darker the color, to an extent, once you go past, then you have to paint again, but, like these lighter colors will need to be painted before the door frames will need to be
Okay,
painted.
okay.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So that's why they do it on the exterior. You get another 10 years out of the life of that color. You don't really think about that, but from a commercial building, as much as they got to paint, the design people say, you know, get this as dark as you can now, you won't have to repaint it or won't have to worry about it. Bugs showing up, stuff on it, it's quick. That's the reason.
And I'm fine with that. I have no preference, but I've just seen an increase in that design choice, including with non-residential. And so again, while this may have different elements that might break it up, I just want to make sure council's okay that if we have darker colored non-residential buildings, that's fine. That's really just why I'm asking.
Council? Anyone?
I think, you know, we could bar colors that make buildings appear as though the material is poured concrete. I think that's just fine. I think that's a fine standard to apply. If you don't want to see tilt up and you don't want to see concrete block, then I think you just add a provision to colors that says, you know, you use whatever materials allow, but it better not look like concrete. And if it does, we're going to say no.
Does that work?
I mean, it's up to y'all.
Yeah.
I'm just bringing it up.
Let's do it.
Um,
I've not heard that before.
Well,
It's
it
kind of
looks like
interesting.
concrete to
and
you, may not.
I think
look
that's
like
kind of cool.
concrete to you. I would want it to be something that was easy to enforce. And, but I know, but look, you can ask my wife about my fashion sense. I'm not the one you want to talk to about aesthetics. If it's strong, it looks good to me, but I know as a town, we gotta think about that, or at least non-residential.
How this is written is it wouldn't allow like a gloss black.
Right, well, I mean, maybe, it depends, is gloss black considered overly bright neon or day glow? Probably not.
I don't know. It's gonna be-
Fuchsia, yeah,
Yeah,
that's a no, you know, puce, no, sorry, but gloss black, probably okay.
I think if you went with like a gray, you know, you're gonna accent with different things. It's not just gonna be solid. You're gonna have windows, greenery.
I mean, yeah, but, you know, we can't, some of these buildings that we're talking about, this being addressed will be just a big blank wall down through there. You know, maybe, so we gotta think about it that way. I mean, I don't see that,
For those most fashionably challenged.
And again, that doesn't need to be answered now, but this is something I've wrestled with looking at our current corridor overlay standards and the lack of guidance in how to enforce it, frankly. You know, we've seen a lot of stucco being used lately. I know that's come up. But again, if it's stucco and it's, you know, painted all a dark gray, I'm just curious which way, you know, council leans on that. And again, I don't mean to get into a whole big discussion on it tonight, but I did just want to highlight that because I've struggled to understand what the intent of our current corridor overlay standards are. Is it really about brick and wood and stone? Because if so, we're missing the mark on that now, and that's why I just want to bring it up as a discussion point.
You know, I encourage you guys not to set a palette of required materials. When it comes to color and material, it's best just to say what you can't do and stop there.
right,
And I think we can add some provisions to address Mike's concern. Like I said, if it ends up looking like a concrete tilt-up panel, that's not allowed. Okay, that's cool.
right.
Okay, couple other things. We're asking that building address numbers be included on non-residential buildings. You know, that's kind of a no-brainer. We've also got some suggestions. If you've got a multi-building development where you're doing multiple buildings, we've got some suggestions about how those things be organized or be configured, so that they surround parking lots. Or that they're configured in ways that work well with their surroundings. And it'll be a little bit more clear when you see the multi-building development image. You know, when you've seen that, you guys might decide, I like this, or no, I don't like this. And you know, that's an easy standard for us to just lop off, okay? Decide it doesn't fit for you guys, okay?
Chad, on those numbers on the buildings, is there a size limitation on those numbers? Or color of them or anything of where they're visible?
I stopped short. I stopped short of that. You know.
Our building code has it, and it should be done on all new buildings, but,
Right.
yeah, so it should be covered in there. So we maybe leave that alone.
I believe Henderson County Property Addressing Ordinance does have dimensional and color standards. It's just not always checked
I
and
know.
followed.
Exactly. So I was wondering if y'all go out on y'all's CO. My biggest fear is like they get a call and they go to it, and some of these parking lots on these industrial buildings or commercial buildings may be 100 foot from the main door. And they're struggling to see, well, am I at the right place or do I need to be the next door down?
Getting to the dark buildings, the problem we have run into is dark numerals on a dark colored wall. And I believe the property addressing ordinance from the county says it has to be a contrasting color for
It's
visibility.
what it says.
Yeah.
Yeah. Residential's one size and commercial's a different size. Okay,
So I think the county
Okay.
covers that, Chad. Yeah.
Happy to just cross-reference the county standard. Last piece in this non-residential set of standards is for out parcels. Okay, so this is a development that's got a main anchor building and then there's pad sites out front. And so these things are essentially intended to make sure that these out parcels are developed in ways that don't interfere with circulation, that don't interfere with the appearance of the anchor store, that we've got landscaping, and that these things are configured in ways that are sympathetic to the anchor building instead of just haphazard along the front. And this would apply, you know how Ingalls has the gas pumps out front? That's a great example of kind of how these standards would apply. If Ingalls came along and put in another out parcel in front, right, then there would be some standards about where that could go so that, you know, driveway access is maintained. What kinds of treatment are on the wall so that it all looks the same. The Ingalls gas pumps look like the Ingalls building, etc. So there's some provisions for these out parcel sites. Okay?
That makes sense.
That's it for the non-residential stuff. I'm now in the mixed use design standards, and these are instances where we've got a non-residential use with a residential use in it, okay? But it could also be a non-residential commercial building that's got an institutional component to it. So that's also mixed use. You can see in the applicability that we want to apply these mixed use standards to any new development in the TNC district, whether it's mixed use or not, okay? We want to apply these standards to live-work dwellings. That is a building that has my vocation on the first floor and my residence on the second, all right? Any new development that has upper story residential use types, right? So I've got apartments above some other kind of non-residential use, or anything that mixes use types, okay? Not residential use types, but, you know, a residential and a non-residential, or a commercial and an institutional. That's where this stuff applies. We have more standards here. These are new. You do not have mixed use design standards currently. You do apply your corridor overlay standards, which have articulation and material provisions. We go farther with these mixed use design standards, and we address building orientation, we address building location, we talk about how a certain percentage of the lot frontage needs to have building on it, how the ground floor is configured, that some of the parking has to be to the side or the rear, or even most of the parking has to be to the side or the rear. A slightly simpler mixed-use building articulation standard than we use for non-residential. Why is it more simple? Because we have all of these other rules about orientation and entrance, parking, and so forth. Some building entrance standards, some glass fenestration is just a fancy way of saying how much glass is on the building, how much can I see into it, and then roof form. But I'm not spending a lot of time on these standards for a couple of reasons. One, you don't have these now, and two, people aren't building mixed-use buildings, really. It's not, the financing hasn't found its footing yet, despite the fact that we used to do these things before World War II. The last 60 or so years, we haven't really done much mixed-use development. That's not to say it won't come back, but you know, I don't know that these will get used that often. If it does, we want you to have them, and that's why they're here. Do you guys have questions about these?
It's the same thing you've done on the others where you're just defining the minimums, so there's no maximum. You could put
Correct.
a whole wall of windows if you wanted to.
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
And typically,
Absolutely.
mixed use implies apartments above, right?
Sometimes, not always, but sometimes.
Could be not townhomes, condos. But typically, if there's residential above a commercial floor, like you have your store, Biltmore Park,
Mm-hmm.
That's what I think of when I think of mixed use. You've got businesses and above that you got apartments.
Either
Right.
the rent or the sale, or to get mortgages on the,
Really?
you can rent them easy, but you gotta be the primary owner of both top and bottom and rent it all.
Wow.
It's hard to get the insurance. You see what I'm saying? You got insurance issues. You see, the owner can get the whole thing insured, but it's hard to sell one or the other without selling it all together. Does that make sense?
That makes sense.
I think that's what Chad's elaborating too.
No, I think, I mean, this just,
It's
we
just not a,
talk a lot about mixed use, but not a lot gets built.
Right.
It's still pretty rare.
yeah.
And that question comes, do we want apartments?
In mixed use.
I mean, it's gonna be apartments. I mean, Biltmore
Well-
Park's a classic place, but
What zoning's that allowed in Chad? Just town center and
well-
MXR?
Yeah, I mean, the mixed use stuff, we have what we call upper story residential units. One thing I'll mention just right off the top is remember that the steering committee suggests, and we agree, that buildings be limited to 2 stories. 2. So you're not gonna be looking at like multi-story apartment buildings above a first floor retail situation. If anything, it's gonna be 1 story of non-res and 1 story of res, if you get it. Now, let's look at where these things are allowed.
She can dig down. 3 basements.
that.
We're suggesting that upper story, multifamily be permitted in the MXR, the mixed residential district, the, town center district, and the industrial district. You could also utilize a conditional zoning district option to get one of these mixed use developments, but this is where this would be permitted. Okay?
Okay with that?
Where it fits.
Okay. Let's talk about multifamily. So there's a continuum here, right? We have the non-residential design standards, which are largely what you have now, okay? With a couple of additions about the size area and the fact that it's more than within 500 feet of the highway. Then there's the mixed use, which is like new, but there's more standards than the non-residential standards, okay? There's more expectation about building quality and articulation and entrance fenestration and that stuff. Then we come to multifamily, and that's more standards still, okay? So it's think of it as non-residential plus mixed use plus some more. So these multifamily design standards include even more design controls, all right? They apply to multifamily buildings, multi-unit residential structures with a continuing care community, residential treatment facilities, congregate care, etc. So that's who, these things apply to. We control the following. There's standards for the street network, building orientation, building entrances, building facades, facade variation, okay, depending upon the number of different buildings you have to have different design treatment for that, and there's differing numbers of features you have to include. The more buildings you have, the more variation you have to provide. There's standards for massing, there's standards for articulation, there's standards for height, there's standards for roof form, building materials and colors, rules for secondary structures, okay, and for site features. So lots of standards for multifamily. And the reasoning behind that is we want to be sure that if we do get apartments in town, that they have really high quality design, okay? One thing I want to be sure that everybody is copacetic with and understands. And it's not a happy fact, but I'm going to say it anyway. Townhouses are single family development. They are not multifamily. We cannot apply design standards to townhouses unless we do it through a conditional rezoning process or we incorporate incentives, okay? So I just want to be sure that you guys are aware of that.
Incentives are typically density.
So should we put it where it has to be conditional?
You talk about the,
townhomes.
townhomes. Is that even possible, Chad? That any townhome development has to go through conditional? I don't think we can we?
The quick answer to the question is, if you have zoning districts in place today that permit multifamily development, then you must allow that multifamily development in the districts in your new UDO. And you require conditional? Yes, but wherever you currently permit multifamily, you must continue to permit multifamily going forward.
Well, what happens when we've changed the 3 letters for the zoning districts?
You cannot reduce the range of allowable use types.
So
Without.
we can't just make it like one, like, oh, it's only allowable in town center.
Even with our exemption.
Even with your exemption. You have this exemption
That's
while
not-
you're drafting this code. As soon as you've stopped, as soon as the code is adopted. Well, let me say this. Y'all are special, right? And you're out there on the edge. If you want to go there and you want to bar these things, Mike, where are these things allowed right now? I'm sorry, I can't remember off the top of my head. What districts do we allow multifamily in right now?
Well, part of your definition, technically, we don't allow any real multifamily, but we allow attached townhomes in neighborhood commercial, mixed use. And I think MR30.
I think so.
Originally with a special use permit, now conditional zoning only.
This change was made when?
I'd have to look that up.
The
22.
condition- Yeah, probably
Okay.
22 on the conditional part. Probably spring of 22.
I don't know that it's MR30 because I think the ones on Jefferson Road got in because the very top piece was MRNC
And the rest was mixed
and the
use.
rest was
Well, it
not.
went in on
They-
a special use permit, but it would have had to anyway, because of density.
Yeah.
See, these are gonna be allowed by right with enough room. Anything else would have to come in under conditional or special use permit anyway. That one in on special use.
But we can't force that to be conditional only.
That's what he's thinking. Well, that's kind of what I think. On a couple we can limit it to some of the districts, but I don't think as far as just making it
Blanket.
blanket. I don't-
So I know you're looking at the use table, Chad, our multifamily development, again, primarily attached townhome section of the code currently says MR30 mixed use and neighborhood commercial can be located in those districts through a conditional rezoning.
MR30 and NC currently through a conditional
And mixed use. But
and MU.
correct. But technically, those districts are being
Right.
discontinued, although I believe MR30 turned into low density residential LDR.
I don't think that we want to continue to permit
No,
townhouse development in LDR.
no, and I think the steering committee was explicit about that as well.
So you can take them out.
Well, I think the die is cast at that point. We're going there, and we are effectively limiting the range of uses.
Because I believe what you're saying is, again, multifamily in the UDO would be allowed in town center, which is a new zoning district that doesn't exist now, and mixed residential, which is also a new residential district that does not exist now.
Yeah, I mean, I think so, but I'm looking at this table. We've got this P here, which is LDR, which corresponds to MR30, which does allow townhouses today. But what's different is that you're requiring a conditional zoning to handle that. And therefore, you know, I think we could make a straight face claim that we haven't necessarily done away with that we've reduced that use potential. The thing that gives me pause about all of it is the fact that you can do the townhouse in the mixed use district. In the mixed use, did you have to be conditional to be there, to go there?
Yes.
This is. Well. All right, I think, if you wish, we can go, this is, so that what's on my screen right now is is your use table. And based on what we heard from your steering committee, I'm gonna go ahead and turn on track changes. This is, I'm operating in what is your code or will become your code when you adopt, if you adopt. I'm going to do this, because we talked about pulling this out of LDR, correct?
Yes.
We're making that change. TNC is new. Do you want to require a conditional zoning for townhouses in your TNC district?
TNT, hit me out.
The two little brown areas with the new zoning map around the commercial, the main intersections, the commercial cores.
If
Is that
possible,
a yes?
If it's possible, the answer is yes. Happening right now.
I was gonna say, we got special treatment today.
Okay. All right. What about MXR? Same?
I mean, if you want conditional in the town center, I would think you'd probably want conditional in mixed residential. It's a little more expansive. It doesn't go past schoolhouse, but it does expand a little bit down the backside of Boylston, you know, east side of Boylston, between Haywood and Schoolhouse, and then there's also a little bit at the northeastern corner of town, like Butler Bridge over towards Glen Marlow.
Okay.
yes,
Yes.
So that's what we've done, all right? I have pulled out townhouse as a permissible use, and it requires a conditional rezoning. If you guys weren't already requiring this, I would have great consternation about that. But because you're requiring it now, we're doing it. So that's that. Got to have a conditional rezoning to do townhouses in Mills River. Okay?
that's kind of where we was at with it before.
Understood. We have this new flavor thing that we've got to deal with, but the fact that you're doing it now, I think you'll probably, I think you're legally okay. Okay? I really do. We have to be careful about this because this is what's gonna,
Right.
this kind of stuff is what's gonna get us in court. So we don't want to go to court. Okay.
I thought you said 15 minutes ago we were special.
We'll be special then too.
Not to the
Yeah.
developer.
Okay, good. I'm glad that decision has been made. All right. Now, let's talk about what that means for this, for these design standards. We have these multifamily design standards, okay? We don't apply these, townhouse is not multifamily under the building code. But we have provided for you single-family residential design guidelines that you can apply as a condition of approval as part of a conditional rezoning, okay? So if you only allow a use type via conditional rezoning and you decide as part of the negotiation for the development that you want that development to follow design standards, guess what? You can do that. You can choose to apply either the multifamily, if you wish, or the single family. Now, I would suggest to you that, you know, these standards are really built for smaller kind of detached structures. There's rules about porches, garages and things. That doesn't have anything to do necessarily with like a townhouse. So I may need to go into these single family residential design guidelines and supplement them with some additional guidance for townhouses, if you want me to do that.
Sure. Y'all with it on that? On, applying it?
Single family
Or do that?
attached.
Going to. We're thinking, Chad.
I don't know, I put a bunch of scratches on it while I was reading through it earlier, because it's.
And again, Chad, the single family design standards are not applicable without consent, right?
That is correct.
Only
We
through
cannot
conditional.
apply, well, yeah, I mean, the only way that you can apply them is when the landowner agrees to follow them. And that could be that they sign this little form here, this voluntary compliance form that you guys will have in your stuff. So if they sign this, they gotta follow them.
Okay,
Or,
yeah.
or they're doing a conditional rezoning. And town council says, well, Chad, I see you're doing a townhouse development. We really want you to follow the design standards, or the residential design guidelines. So you need to do that. And I say, okay, I'll do it. And it gets done. Or I say, no, I'm not gonna follow the design guidelines. And then you're gonna say, Chad, you're denied.
Right, understood.
Yeah, thanks for explaining that. I was,
That,
yeah, that clears that up. With
Okay.
where's that voluntary compliance little paragraph in there? That's, yeah. Then that makes a
Right,
lot of
that's
sense.
why that's there. Because some people might not need to do a conditional rezoning. And, you know, they might do this because it's gonna make the neighbors happy. And the
Yeah, I was
only
gonna
way the
say, yeah.
neighbors are gonna show up and not complain is if they've agreed to this. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
you might get somebody
they-
who just says, thanks. Yeah. Rare.
Okay. So, like I mentioned, these design guidelines are structured around smaller individual dwelling units. They're not necessarily built for like a townhouse building, you know, where there's like 6 units or 7 units in a row in one building with party walls. They're more for individual kinds of development. If you want me to put townhouse stuff in here, I will. I'm happy to do that.
We won't need it if it goes to conditional, because we can negotiate that out at that point, correct? Or do we need it? in
Yes,
there? Okay,
yes, you don't have to follow these.
right,
You can lay your own out. They're
Okay.
here to help you,
okay.
right? And to give you a starting point, but you know, if you have to follow them, no, you can do something else if you wish.
So C1 is the statement of consistency, which you can voluntarily sign. Does that
Yes.
apply to things after that, or then is D and E now, or well, it's just D, but then is D? Yeah, not optional then.
if you sign this piece of paper, it is not optional.
No, I'm saying if you don't sign it, then basically I'm asking about the after D goes to like 5, which is about like garage doors. And yeah, I would have a little bit of heartburn over saying what kind of hinges and how wide we want to say garage doors can be on a single family home.
So, if somebody signs that statement of consent, then they're agreeing to follow these standards.
Yeah,
If somebody is asked to include as a condition of approval compliance with these or some of these or other standards that are not here, but that have that you've set down for them as part of a conditional rezoning, then that can be done in that way. You don't have to use these if you don't want to in a conditional rezoning case. Now, if you think going forward in the future that when somebody's going to come in and propose a development and you don't want to go through these various design feature provisions that we've got set down here, okay? And you just want to have a blanket statement, follow the single family design guidelines, then we should go in here and take out the ones that you don't like. All right? If you want to reserve the right to pick and choose which ones you're going to apply on a case-by-case basis, then you can decide whether or not you want to go through these and pick out the ones that you don't like. You may choose just not to use them. They're guidelines, so they're only applicable if somebody agrees to follow them. I
it
think
seems
you
like it's
should-
gonna be a lot of stuff for a garage door.
Only if they want to do it though, right?
Well, I guess what Chad's, if a conditional use comes in, we could simply just say, follow the family's, single family standard. But if
Yes.
it's gonna do that, he thinks we should go into it, pick and choose what we wanna leave in, take out, or add.
Mhm.
Like he's got some
That's right.
discrepancy over these hinges, these door widths and all this. But I think this particular council, Chad, will be fine negotiating it one-on-one. But
Mhm.
we may need to, do we need to think about future councils? I don't know. I hate to ever do that.
It just gets a little HOA when it's, it can't exceed an 18-foot garage door, or garage doors have to incorporate decorative hinges or hardware, like.
But I'm
So I really want to come to the town and ask if I can have a 19-foot garage door. I mean,
But in a conditional use, if they sign that, then they're gonna do it.
mhm.
If it's conditional use and it comes to us, we can negotiate all that out.
But
That's correct.
it also goes into the detail of you can have windows or you can have like fog glass windows, but they have to have windows.
I don't know, just seems a little bit much for,
For a single family detached home.
correct. It just seems like a lot of detail that
Mhm.
could take up a lot of time working out here. But, I mean, I don't,
I understand. I mean, we can go through it if you wanna go through it.
No,
These are the typical kinds of things that we include, and absolutely, if these don't fit with what you guys think, we should be doing in Mills River, or you feel like it's too much for you guys to administer, which is certainly understandable because there is a lot here. I think it is absolutely fine to pick and choose. I think that's okay. It's interesting. I've never heard anybody bring that up before. Often what confounds people are these variability standards. If there was ever a set of provisions that to me seemed like they were unwieldy, it's these, which require, every building be distinct from the building on either side and across the street. That to me feels like a lot, but it's a very important standard in places where you're getting, a DR Horton or a Pulte or or something like that, and they're coming in and they have one model, and every single house in the neighborhood is identical. And that does happen. So, I mean, I would say we can certainly go through this now if you want, or you guys can go and search, your thoughts about whether or not you feel like this is too much. The street facing garages are really designed to stop the quote unquote garage dominated landscape. That's really what they're designed to do. And it's done in ways that, kind of focuses on the garage door, because that's really what we can control and what has the most impact on a street front that's just garage, 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 garage. I certainly understand the hesitancy to want to get into that, but that's what this is designed to deal with.
Yeah, you make a valid point, there's, on one hand, you got DR Norton, whatever, and then, on the other side, I just don't wanna have somebody who's building one house be like, oh, well, you gotta have this exact specific garage door.
But at least that's voluntary for that one house, and they don't have to, so that's.
Yeah,
I'm with you, though. I saw that for a single family home on somebody's lot. Why are we telling them what to do for their garage door? But if it's voluntary, except we make it a condition of a conditional rezoning, then we could hold them to that.
But just remember, DR homes are single family, one.
that's what I'm
So
saying,
they're
it's a
being
double-edged
treated
sword.
just like
Yeah.
a single guy, just like me or you go. That's the only problem here is if we're worried about that door facing the street, each one of them is a single family residence, and the permit applicant don't have to sign that if he don't want to. It's only if he wants to.
Unless they have to come in and get conditional rezoning for that development.
So
It's
I think on this, we need to take and look at it and mark it up and then bring it back to Chad or email it to Chad and let him give us some feedback and send it to Michael Grill to make sure we ain't crossing no lines, but we feel comfortable with it.
Sure, absolutely. As a fallback position on the garage stuff, if you're nervous about this or whatever, a softer approach to that is a basic standard that says, look, we don't want to see any garage doors proud of the front porch or the front door, right? That garage needs to be 4 feet behind the front door, 6 feet behind the front door, 12 feet behind the front door, okay? And then you worry less about what's on the garage door and all of that stuff, and more about what's closer to the street. Is it the porch or the garage? And, that may cause you concern as well, but that's a softer approach than all of this kind of very detailed design oriented stuff.
I just tried to read it as I was in the meeting in March, and I was a resident, and I flipped to this and went, what are you guys trying to make me do? That was that's where I came from this, just so you understand. You bring up a valid point of the mass, exact cookie cutter, the same over and over. I was just sitting at my desk going, holy smokes, we can't do this.
But typically, the people that's living in there buying those, they're okay with it because theirs looks the same way across the street.
Yeah.
And when we, once we drive by, we just drive by the entrance. I'm being honest. And our land here is just not contiguous to slide that garage back 4 or 5 foot. Sometimes I have to slide them forward to get you in it without high centering or so on and so forth. We're just in a.
Or then we have variances because they can't meet that. Which is a hardship.
True. So.
Which they didn't create.
But living like that, to me, living like that with all these defined rules takes away your identity and a step towards freedom. I mean, you're being conformed into a certain thing that is cookie cutter.
Until until you sign.
Well,
That's where
Once
it
you
makes me
sign-
feel a lot better
Yeah.
because then it is
Yeah.
voluntary.
voluntary.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll look
Okay,
at
so,
that. and
so
get you some-
y'all will go back and think about those.
You're about to get one.
And, you know, we'll talk about some adjustments, right?
Yes,
Yep.
Okay. All right, this is, we are now into exterior lighting. You guys want to press on, keep trucking?
yeah, let's at least get through this, I think. I mean, we still got, what, 3 or 4 more after this, right?
Right. I think it's a good goal to get through exterior lighting. I'd like for us to do infrastructure maybe when you guys are fresh, because that's
Okay,
got
makes
street.
perfect sense.
So let's talk about exterior lighting. These carry forward rules that you already have, okay? 154, 117 of your zoning ordinance has your exterior lighting standard, and these carry those forward, okay? But there are a couple of notable changes that I'll mention. First, you don't have any maximum heights for your lighting. Okay, so we are suggesting a couple of heights be added. I believe it's 32 feet height in a parking lot, 16 feet in a pedestrian area, and I think it's 8 feet on walls. So that's one change. Another change that we're suggesting is to your maximum illumination values, okay? And so here's what that standard does. Your current standard says, look, you can have exterior lighting on your property, no problem. As much as you want, no problem. As long as the amount of light that is measured at your lot line does not exceed this specified amount, you can do whatever you want. And that's a great strategy. And it's one that we use in every code that we write. Here's the rub. Right now, the standard that you have at your lot lines is very low. It is 1 foot candle. And that is a standard that we use along lines where a non-residential use abuts a single-family detached home. We absolutely use a 1 foot candle measurement. We do not use a 1 foot candle measurement where a commercial building abuts a commercial building, or where an industrial building abuts an industrial building. We have a higher foot candle number. Your code doesn't. It's 1 foot candle everywhere. And that is onerous, in my opinion. And as a result, we are suggesting the ability for non-residential development that abuts other non-residential development to have a slightly higher foot candle threshold than if you abut single-family detached, which should be 1 foot candle, which you have now. Okay, so we're actually discussing softening some of these rules for non-residential areas.
Where's
Last-
that 1 foot candle measured now? Because when we first did this, we said it was at Mike's chest height, which is pretty up there.
Like, elevation off the ground, where's it measured?
Is that when Mike's wearing his platform shoes, or?
He's always got one.
So typically, where this is measured, is 1 foot above grade. All right, that's where, your light meter should be held, when you're gauging foot candle, measurements. And that's set down in this section. We have adjusted that to clarify. There's 3 things that happen. 1, you're a foot above grade. 2, you're using a light meter that has been calibrated in the last 6 months. And 3, it's operated by a person who's been certified to use that light meter. And those are the 3 things that you need to have when you're determining foot candles.
In here right now, it says it was calibrated within 2 years.
Oh, okay, 2 years. 2 years.
That's.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's fine. The point is that it's calibrated. It's not just, somebody went to their garage and got their light meter that grandfather used back in World War II. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think we've heard,
Those big differences. This issue about light height, this issue about foot candle measurements at non-residential boundaries. I've also placed some additional limitations, or I'm suggesting some limitations. Happily, this hasn't happened to you yet. It's happened everywhere else in the universe. And that is the bright LED lights around the doors and the windows. Have you seen this?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I don't know. I don't remember seeing any of this in Mills River,
There's-
but we're
there's
suggesting
no-
that's prohibited.
No, I just know of it. I mean, it's even a residential thing there.
Yeah, we're suggesting that be prohibited. And so those are the changes that we would suggest be made. So, let's walk through. These standards apply to non-residential, mixed-use, multifamily, townhouse, 2-family triplex, and quadplex development, all right? We are not applying these standards to single-family detached development, all right? I want to be sure that part is clear.
Well, can I ask about that? So, but we would want the lights in a single family detached residential development that were installed as part of the development to have full cutoff and not, broad up light, none of that stuff, right?
Street lights?
Yeah, street lights.
Yes, we've got some streetlight standards in here.
Okay, and I apologize for not catching that.
We did,
Just wanna make sure.
we've set out some prohibited lighting, okay? Lighting that flashes, lighting that strobes, neon lights, LED lights around doors. That's all prohibited. And we are prohibiting that at single family. So look at 642C. Single family, while it's not generally applied or applicable, we don't allow single family to have forms of prohibited lighting. And there's the shielding standards, which is basically full cutoff shielded, is also applied to single family detached. Now, as a enforcement matter, I'll leave it up to you guys about whether or not you're going to go enforce and get in the middle of some conflict between neighbors about somebody's floodlight. I don't think you should get into that, but some places do. And as a result of, my suggestion that you not get into that, I've exempted single family development from these foot candle, counts. So, that's definitely something that you should think about. But I will say that, enforcing a lighting ordinance that is applied to single family detached development is a lot of work. And you'll need to have somebody who is available on nights and weekends to do that. Places that do apply these standards to single family detached development have code enforcement staff who work on nights and weekends. If you don't have that, probably not a good idea to have that standard applied to homes. Yes, the police can do it. Yes, the police have other stuff to do.
Are you light certified, sir?
We'd have to try the light meter, wouldn't we?
Would you like,
We own one, don't we? No?
You should have one.
We should.
We rely on the engineer's, photometric drawing. They're the professional.
Well, You may ultimately find that you need to have a light meter, that may come up, and if you do, you need to get certified in its use.
Can't work nights and weekends.
Anyway, we've got some exemptions, right? Construction lighting, emergencies, low voltage landscaping, that's from your current standards. Holiday lighting, seasonal lighting, that's exempt. Stuff that the state requires. New development has to prepare a lighting plan, has to be prepared by a professional. You know, it has to show the, you know, the isolux lines, the photometric contours, all that stuff has to be in the lighting plan. We talk about the prohibited lighting, you know, excessive, flashing, revolving, high intensity. We are suggesting luminous tube lighting, which includes neon and rope lighting, be prohibited. On building exteriors and in configurations where it outlines a window or a door. Now, you know, lights on buildings, that happens in seasonal, right? And so seasonal is exempt, but day in, day out, 365, we would suggest luminous tube lighting not be permitted. Lights that look like traffic control signals should not be allowed. Then we get into the standards. We talk about appearance, you know, that the exterior lighting fixtures across the development need to be compatible in style, material, color. We talk about the standards for architectural lighting, lighting of flags, etc. That's all allowed, as long as it's 50 watts or less. Here are the fixture height standards that I mentioned are new, okay? And the numbers are 25 in a parking lot and 16 in pedestrian areas, 12 on walls. These are new, and we would suggest that you consider those. There's some provisions for lamp type. Most lamp types are allowed, except low pressure sodium and non-color corrected high pressure sodium and mercury vapor. Those are prohibited. Those are the streetlights of old. Nobody uses these anymore, but we would suggest these be prohibited. Note that we have not assigned a color value or a temperature value for light. Some places do that. We would suggest you not do that. We would suggest these foot candle limitations. How this works is if you're doing development and you're on a lot and your lot abuts a lot in conservation, in rural preservation, in rural residential or LDR, then the amount of light that can be measurable at the lot line is limited to 1 foot candle. If you're doing development and you abut mixed residential, the rural mix or a residential conditional, that you have a limitation of 1.5 foot candles. You're abutting a commercial district or downtown or a town center district or a conditional. It's 2. You're abutting industrial, conditional zoning, or a conditional commercial or a conditional industrial, then 2.5. Okay, so we've raised your foot candle thresholds slightly in contexts where you abut development in a commercial or industrial district. Okay, this is not uncommon. One last thing. You guys have some limitations on stream buffers, lights and stream buffers. This is currently, you know, in your current code, and we've carried it forward. So if you've got a pedestrian feature inside a stream buffer or surface water buffer, we've carried that language forward. Okay, and that is less than 1 foot candle, so we did not change that. Rules for mounting location, rules for shielding, these standards are what you have now. Everything's got to be full cutoff, fully shielded, designed to prevent light from being emitted upwards towards the sky. Under canopy lighting needs to be recessed within the canopy so that the source of illumination is not visible from offsite. Wall packs, floodlights, also full cutoff and shielded. Okay. We've got some standards for specific features, building entrances, parking lot lighting, etc. There's one important standard here. Ambient lighting required. If you have a parking lot and you're open after dark, then your parking lot should maintain a threshold of ambient lighting of at least half a foot candle after dark during hours of operation, so that your parking lot is not dark and thus unsafe. After business hours, you can turn your lights off if you wish.
So in saying that, Chad, did the steering committee, come up with that 25-foot height for the parking lot? It just seems
No,
low to me.
those are typical standards. You can use those, you can use different standards.
That's okay.
One of the big deciders, and those are up to numbers, they're not, everything has to be 25, it's up to 25. One of the big deciders here is what Duke Power says, okay? Because Duke Power provides the lights, right? In most places. I don't know if that's necessarily true for you guys, but most parking lot light standards are provided by the power company. Power company stocks a certain kind of light standard. There's a few variations from it, but they have a general model that they use. They need to look at this and come back to us and say, yep, 25 is good, or nope, 25 is not good. We use the KPX 357 and it's got a height of 32 feet or whatever it is. We need to hear from them and know what works for them. Generally speaking, the lower the light height, the more lights you have in the parking lot. The higher the light height that's allowed, the fewer the light standards you have in the parking lot.
That's why I
The
missed it.
higher-
Yeah, that's why I missed it, Chad, because these, all these commercial parking lots, the Ingles, Publix, you would think they would want less poles in the parking lot, but still have it lit well.
Yes,
That's my
yes,
thought.
they would. That's where the beauty of the illumination value comes in, because they can have the higher light
Okay,
fixtures,
okay,
if they want, as long as they're not, blowing out their neighbors in
Okay.
terms of light. Now, I did put in that standard at 25 as a starting point. It wouldn't surprise me to see that go to 32. If somebody came back to you guys and said it needs to be 40 or 50, I'd be a little bit dubious about that. Okay, that's a really tall light fixture, but I wanted to get something on the page for you guys to react to and the power company to react to.
okay.
Will it stay 25? I don't know. Okay. Sign lighting, kind of subject to your sign standards. One thing I'd like to call your attention to, this is a new standard. If you like it, great. If you don't, we can take it out. It essentially says if you're lighting an outdoor display area, where you've got products for sale and you want to light that, that's fine as long as you're open. After you've closed for the evening, we would request that outdoor display area lighting be turned off. If there's a security concern, then you can use a motion activated light if you wish, or you could seek a conditional rezoning and avoid having to comply with this standard. Okay, so who would use this? Well, obviously car dealerships want their cars lit at night, right after they close. Back in the day, it used to be so that people could go to the parking lot and look at cars after the evening. Now, a lot of places drag a chain across the driveway, so you can't get in there anymore. My point, question, whatever, is if you've got your entrance blocked, nobody can see the cars after dark, so why do you have to have the lights on? Is it for security? Yeah, okay, well, how about a motion activated light so that, we don't have to blow out the night sky with your security lighting. But there are also Home Depots, you know, grocery stores and things that have product outside. So they like that. And the reason I'm telling you this is y'all need to think about whether or not you want to have this standard. I know that dark skies is something that's important to the community. We've had some questions about it. This kind of outdoor display area lighting after closure is an easy place for the town to move closer to dark sky if you so chose. So that's something for you to think about. Okay. Streetlight standards. If you're going to do streetlights, here are some standards. Basically, you need to, if you're going to do this, you've got to follow the NCDOT's roadway lighting policy. And there's some standards about spacing. We stopped short of light height here because I think that's going to kind of depend on what the electric company provides, etc. But those standards are there for you. And obviously these are street lights that are inside the right of way. Okay.
So it is, so the hypothetical car lot that's here now, that's lighting 24/7 is still, it falls under the blanket, allowed by right. Yeah,
Yes,
because they're grandfathered
that's
in.
correct. If I'm Chad's used cars and I'm out there on 280 and I've got lights on at night to light my cars and we adopt this UDO, do I have to turn my lights off or put them on motion sensors? Answer, no, I don't.
Okay.
But if I'm Chad's used cars, business is great, and I want to expand, right, after the adoption of this UDO, am I going to need to comply with this? Answer, yeah, I would. And so, something to think about.
Yeah, one of the things we want to think about that is if someone does expand, do they have to go back and retrofit every single light or just the part that's expanded? Does that make sense?
Mhm.
They may already have lights out there that are non-conforming, but on the new section of parking lot, they would have to be conforming unless we granted a variance. But would it be cost prohibitive to go back and retrofit every light or just wait as they age out?
Yeah.
Because right now you can't get a non-conforming light. You can't get a light that's not full cutoff. If I understand properly from Duke, they're not going to put it in. So as the old ones age out, they're being put in. Just look at our street lights. Is they're aging out.
Commercial buildings, we're not, they don't do power on our lighting on their outside.
On their
Even in the
buildings.
parking lot.
Really?
Oh, yeah, we're buying custom stuff.
So you are?
Yeah,
Okay.
we don't own like a telephone pole, but we're on an isolated mattress and we pre-wire the ground from the building.
Mhm.
Yeah, there's very little of that, like you would think. I don't even know that Duke Power is furnishing stuff for Ingles or Pump.
They may not be here, but I'm
Yeah,
working a
no.
project in Asheville where
Yeah.
Duke is furnishing the lights and they're on
Okay.
metal poles, full cutoff. It's the shoebox design. Yeah, and they're underground wiring to get to them. And yeah,
Chad, is there a standard for that? A percentage, regarding improvement and what has to comply? Because I know we had that in the current lighting ordinance, maybe
Yeah.
that a 50% changed or more, you had to bring everything in compliance.
Right. There are, and I appreciate the question and I appreciate the concern. And the reason that they're not in your code is because the world is different now with this downzoning stuff. What I'm very nervous about is writing standards for you guys that are going to require you to track every single thing about every single development. I think after a while, it's going to become very, very difficult for you guys to keep up with who's been approved to do what and who hasn't, and who has the ability to not reach full compliance versus, who does have to come into full compliance. And why this really matters is not so much this UDO amendment that we're doing now, but once you've gotten that in place and 10 years down the road, you're gonna go and you're gonna amend it again, right? And you guys are gonna be making amendments to this thing over time. And if we write these things so that there's differential rules that apply to, new development that only comes along after we've changed the rules, then you're gonna find yourself in a place where you've got multiple development codes that you have to work out of, okay? You've got the code that I had before to cover the nonconformities, and then there's the code that I've adopted, and then I went 5 years and I've made some more changes, and now I've got that code. And so here's 3 sets of codes that I have to keep up with, that my landowners have to keep up with, and I have to keep all of that straight. And that's why I'm suggesting to you that you basically say, look, if you were here when we adopted this development code, you get what you got and you can keep it forever. You want to make a change, you come into full compliance with the code standards that are in place at that time. And I understand that that's not fair. And I understand that that's expensive. And I understand that in today's world, we let people be non-conforming. But in this new world, you guys are going to have to track all of this stuff and distinguish between who has to do what based on what set of standards that were adopted by the town at what point in the future. And it's going to become unwieldy and too much for you to manage. And you need a very clear, bright line to say, this is what you have to do unless you make a change. And when you roll the dice and you make that change, you're going in. And it's going to cost you money, but you're the one who made that decision to do that. And I really want to encourage you guys to think about that and not structure this so that every standard we have has all of these caveats and what ifs and, well, if you only do this or you only do that, you're really making this very complicated. It's not so much for this code. Think about what happens when it gets modified 5 years down the road. And how are we going to navigate this when we've set up a standard that says, well, it's only 50%, but we're going to do it as you age out. And that becomes the rule until you change it again. And now people have 3 different standards to follow. So that is my warning, or my request, not a warning, but my concern for why I've made it so black and white, so cut and dry, is because now we're in this place where we can't just easily create nonconformities. We have these rules that we've got to follow, right? And the kind of go-to is to only apply it to the new and to not apply it to the existing, which is fine, but you have to be very careful about how you manage the existing. You have to think about not what's existing on the ground today, but how are you going to manage what's existing in 2030 or 2035? And that's my concern for you guys, and that's why I've drafted it.
So Chad, in that type of scenario and those ones that will come up in the future, we should default to what you said before, which are the 3 flexibility mechanisms:
Right.
the variance, the conditional zoning, or becoming non-conforming.
That's right.
Okay.
That's exactly right. So, I would say apply the standard whole hog. If you can't meet the whole hog standard, use one of the flexibility mechanisms that allows the town to do one-offs in ways that are traceable, trackable, enforceable, and that we can live with under future amendments.
Okay, Chad, I got a question. Maybe you can answer or staff can answer, but we take a convenience store. A lot of them around here will close at say 9, 10 o'clock, but they leave the canopy lights on for people to still be able to pump with a card. Are they considered open?
If the gas pump is open, you're open.
Okay, fair enough. I know I'll get asked that question in the next week or 2, so.
Sure.
I want to have.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to go pump gas at a dark.
See what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, that
But
wouldn't.
I was thinking,
I mean, I don't know what hoodlums are out at 10 o'clock at night, but
Anybody that wants to meet the German Shepherd, come on.
I was making a joke that it's 10 o'clock. I wanna go home.
The place that's across from the Eagles that has all of the drink machines outside, right?
Yeah.
If I could pull into that parking lot at 3 in the morning and get a drink out of the drink machine.
Yeah.
No, that's perfect. That's the answer I needed.
Non-caffeinated.
Okay, the last piece to this are the rules that we have for how you measure the lighting stuff. We'll stop here. This is a good stopping point. I appreciate all the time that you guys have given over to this, probably way more than you wanted to. But, you know, great conversation. We settled this townhouse thing. We settled the paving thing. We talked a lot about how the standards operate when the use changes. It's great, good stuff. Very helpful.
So how are we gonna need to get through the rest of this? Table this meeting and re-adjourn it at some point?
How many business meetings are we gonna have?
I would like, not tonight. I don't wanna keep going, but,
No.
I would like to have another, 'cause the other half of this is, yeah, there's quite a bit of stuff in here.
So I think we're continuation of this discussion for a little while.
Okay, so what Matt suggested is the February 12th meeting, your regular meeting. You don't have a heavy agenda. That would be a good time to,
Chad, are you available on February the 12th? Matt says we have a light agenda that night and we could just continue on. moving forward.
Okay.
If you're
Let me
available.
glance at my calendar. Yes, I am.
Okay.
Perfect.
It's gonna work pretty smoothly for all of us, and I don't think it's putting us behind in our timeline too bad, is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's just keep the other agenda items.
regular
don't-
agenda item. No.
To the,
Yeah.
move
Yeah,
everything.
you
to
can
the-
just
if we
close
have
out
to.
and we'll have it as a regular agenda,
Okay,
Yeah.
that's what we'll do.
or
We'll
just business meetings.
Yeah, we'll just
Yeah.
adjourn this and we'll put it on, the February 12th agenda.
Yep, we can do that.
Staff will work with you to figure out how we're gonna timeline it to come online and all. They'll make that happen.
Sure. We've got several months to go, but you know, y'all are, I know you're focused on it and we're up against the timeline. We're gonna hit this and I really appreciate y'all's time and attention and your comments. This is very, very helpful, so thank you.
Thank you.
All right,
Thank you.
thanks.
Thank you.
I guess we need a motion to adjourn this meeting.
I'll make a motion that we adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thanks, Chad.
Thank you, Chad.
Thanks, guys.
Good night.